For invocation by Supervisor Stroud, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Heavenly Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us our trespasses, which we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the public comment. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. Please provide your full name, district, and submit in your public comments so that we can be properly included in the public record. First up, we have Reverend Sherman Davis.
Thank you. I am Reverend Sherman Davis, Pastor Davis. I reside in the Dalton district. And want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I want to thank our Senator Richard Stewart for inviting me today to Richmond to do the invocation at the Senate meeting. I had a wonderful time down today, and so it was a real blessing to be there. And the difference from there and here is they make you write your prayer down, and then you have to turn it in and make sure it's okay, right? So here's the prayer, and we will share it with you tonight, and then we'll get out of your way so that we can you can get on with the real business of the agenda. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we do thank you, Lord, for the wonderful privilege to approach your wonderful throne of grace. And Lord, we are thankful that it's a throne of grace. If there's anything that we need, Lord, it is grace. And you exhort us, Lord, first of all, to in supplications and prayers and intercessions and giving of thanks to be made for all men, for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of God, our Father, and the Lord Jesus Christ, our Savior. And it's wonderful to pray a prayer that's acceptable in the sight of God, who will have all men to be saved, to come to the knowledge of the truth. For there is one God, one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus, who gave himself a ransom for all. And so, Lord, your word says the king's heart is in your hand. And so we ask that the supervisors, Lord, their hearts to be in your hand, that you would lead, guide, and direct. The scripture says that as the rivers of waters, he turneth, and whithersoever he will, he leads. Proverbs 21:1. Lord, we all are not always concerned about, Lord, the things that you're concerned about. We have our own things that we are, Lord, put first. We become enumered with our own cares, our own crises, our own concerns, our own ambitions. We are busy with the wood, hay, and stubble of this world. And so, Lord, we ask in Jesus' name that you would restore our concerns for your heart, for your cries, and we would use us in your mighty power to glorify your wonderful name. And Lord, at the end, when all is said and done, may we be counted as faithful. And we ask this all in the wonderful name of the Lord Jesus Christ, who may soon return. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. God bless you. Thank you.
Mr. Shaw.
James Shaw, James Monroe District, columnist, Northern X Sentinel, citizen journalist, kgmedia.top, not speaking in my capacity as EDA member. People have likely been wondering, when the pastor hat comes out, tonight's the night. God has given me an opportunity to visit with a wide variety of people throughout the county. In the past few weeks, a sea change has occurred. On the federal level, you have buyouts, early retirements, layoffs, and outright firings. These can have a direct or indirect effect on friends, acquaintances, family members, and relatives. What to do? Let's start with the obvious. Reverend Sherman Davis mentioned this. Pray. Not ordinary prayer, but serious, targeted prayer. We have not been through this process before on this level, so we pray for patience and creative guidance as we go and guide others through their struggles. Number 2, help. Everyone has different talents and abilities, so consider ways to help the neighbor through the process. Some will choose to help with time. Some will help with talent, HR connections, resume writing and editing, etc. And some will even pull out the wallet and aid in that way. Number 3, listen. Sometimes you don't have to give your great wisdom and advice. All you need to do is be that listening ear that the person and family that needs to now pivot and go to a new direction of perhaps moving to a new house that's smaller, new county, new state. Pray, help, listen. Those are the kind of things that we do here in King George County, as we are our brother's keeper at various times, and especially in these times. May God bless the people of King George County who, in the coming weeks and months, will be God's servants to those around us who are in need. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Shaw. Ms. Anne Marie, are you looking to speak? Come on. Yes?
Anne Marie, I didn't have time to go up and get it, so if you. No.
She doesn't have it, but no. You can still talk. Okay. Is there anyone else that'd like to make a public comment?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Hobie Mitchell. I'm a managing partner of Green Energy Ventures. Just one comment. When you said the Lord's Prayer and you opened up to that, I think that covers everything. You know, in the best of times or the worst of times, that always does the trick. And so I was glad to hear that. That's the first time I can ever remember at a meeting where that opened that. I think that was right on. Thank you. So I'm here to talk about a text amendment which Mr. Smolnick had brought up to you for information item. And I knew there were some questions about the request by Supervisor Collins. But what you have before you is 2 bits of information. I think you're going to bring it up at the next meeting officially. But this is the request for the text amendment on building height. And with it were some visuals that go with it, because we are still doing 2 stories in the front and then 3 stories behind. So this illustrates it, and that would be proper too. The text amendment was just to memorialize it. I think it was in the best interest, we thought, of everybody. I think the county attorney looked at it and thought the best process was a text amendment. And I think you're going to review it with some other stuff next time. But I wanted to give you some information tonight about that, so you had it in front of you. It was public. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them at any time. So thank you very much for your time. And one thing, we are proffering for $2 million for that fire truck that you're going to talk about tonight too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm Perry Bowen, 17518 Anzatico Lane, Shiloh District. I was sitting back here at the last meeting and started listening to the presentation on a battery storage facility. And like not following my father's advice to keep my mouth shut, I stood up and said something about sprinklers, which then the next day, or within several days, Supervisor Stroud told the people who are making the battery storage facility to call me. And I engaged with this wonderful guy in the back who will speak to you here shortly in a telephone conversation that went from good to bad to bad to good to good to bad to bad to good. I'm a farmer. I'm not an engineer, but I know something about moving water. I started designing irrigation systems when I was 40 years ago, when I was 20-something years old. And we move a lot of water on our farm to water our crops. It makes absolutely no sense to me to build a 30,000 gallon tank and not put the sprinklers to keep these units cool. The people managing this are going to be in Texas. They're not going to be here. We have an absolutely amazing fire department. Amazing fire department. They can do all of this, okay? But why should they? Why should Chief Mooney have every duty sheet or however they line their help, should he have to be concerned whether the person's had this proper training? Especially when it can be done automatically. So it's a much more efficient use of water. They're talking about spraying water 100 feet. You can't spray a garden hose 100 feet. You have to have a huge stream of water in bursts. So then you spray the water, it evaporates. You spray the water, it evaporates. And in our conversations, they said to you guys, it's an 8-hour burnout. Okay, that's once it catches on fire. But it could be hours and hours and hours before that. And it just seems like a tedious process that has nothing to do with what firemen, or not nothing, but it's not the essence of what firemen are trained to do. Firemen are trained to save lives and to put out fires. And that's not what this is. This is sprinkling water. This is more of a lawn service deal than a fire deal. So if the county's going to do it, and that's fine, they ought to make as many demands on the applicant as they can to do as much of this service themselves. And then whatever's left over, we should get paid for every minute that is spent doing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jason Greenwood, Shiloh District. Less prepared and more direct than my fellow citizen. With regard to both the solar project and the battery storage facility, my understanding is that the board is generally in support. I think, and will become more organized. I don't see how any property owner in the Shiloh District would be in support of either of these projects, other than those to whom I cast no judgment whatsoever, other than those who stand to financially benefit. And in fact, I would say that from now on, everything to do with that zoning, the zoning special exceptions, should be sent out by King George alert, so that people like me don't have to scramble through 392-page proposals and rush to meetings after they work all day to defend a zoning plan that we're supposed to be able to rely on. So a zoning special use exception should have a great deal of justification. And again, any property owner in that district, what do I would love to have somebody explain to me, what do I or anybody else who owns property in the Shiloh District, which I believe is zoned A, agricultural, right? What does any property owner benefit from either of those projects? And I have a couple of ideas. One, I believe the county owns property. First of all, we have commercial and industrial districts where these projects can go. Secondly, I believe the county owns property. Why don't we lease that property for these projects and actually get paid, as opposed to just planning them in a district that is zoned agricultural? Like I said, there'll be more. I think I speak for a lot of Shiloh residents in that we're catching up. Everyone I talked to, and it was a lot of people and people who own a lot of land, not a single person was familiar with the details of these projects. So I'm probably at the front end of catching up, but I think it'll become more organized. And I just wanted to identify that to the board, that if you're going off of the presumption that the Shiloh District citizens are in support of these projects, I think that's a misplaced presumption. I don't think that's accurate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, I'm Madison Morgan. I'm with Tri-County City Soil and Water. So also in regards to the battery storage center, this kind of whole battery storage center is a relatively new topic, right, for Virginia. We see how people have, our organization at least has legislation written for both large-scale solar farms and data centers, right? So I did inquire kind of to our association. I know our director, Anthony Statz, kind of put most of that legislation out here for you guys at the last meeting regarding this. I touched base with our association and the legislative team to kind of see, and you know, we are in support of the county doing what's best for the county, but we would love for you guys to take a deep dive really into kind of the environmental impacts of this project. You know, we, as a district, we have 13 producers that are within a small radius that could be kind of impacted by any type of environmental hazardous materials that are coming off this site in the event of a fire. You're really in close proximity to both Peppermill Creek and the Upper Machoda here. So again, we just want you guys to kind of take all routes, consider everything, and not put our farmers at risk. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Anne Marie? Here's your form.
I can read it for you. Miss Anna Marie, do you like me to read it for you? Sorry about it. There was some confusion. Miss Anna Marie had called me last night to ask me to read it because she didn't know if she'd be back in town. She had an appointment, and I didn't get it before I had left this morning. So I'm going to read. This is from Anna Marie Lovell. First, I want to thank every one of you for your service to the community, but I also want to ask that you make the right decisions for the county. I know you don't make a lot of money and you work hard, but you do have a lot of power over the residents of King George. Your decisions should be right or you will destroy our county. For that reason, I want to tell you tonight that you should think very carefully about this proposed lithium battery facility. I understand that people want to sell their land and make a profit, but this company wants to use the land for a lithium battery energy storage facility. Lithium batteries can be dangerous if they are damaged or overcharged or stored improperly. They can cause fires that are difficult to extinguish and have resulted in injuries and fatalities. Such batteries, if damaged or overcharged, can cause the batteries to overheat and result in a very aggressive fire that spreads rapidly and is very challenging to extinguish. Lithium batteries contain many dangerous metals such as cobalt, which is a potential cancer risk for humans. They also have other toxic things like copper, nickel, and lead. This could put our emergency service people in danger, as well as the people of King George. I want to tell you tonight to please consider not giving any money to any organization that just because they say they want to build 21 homes for teachers and first responders and healthcare workers. An example of this was Project Faith. Project Faith has had a lot of financial problems. They didn't pay their bills, and one of their managers ended up in jail. Ms. Wardlaw left Project Faith in 2018 after bringing $30 million to the organization for affordable housing. The organization has been financially mainly by grants and tax credits handled by state agencies. Please don't give away any more of our tax money. 2 years ago, the last supervisors gave $600,000 to broadband to bring internet service to our county. I don't see any of this service in King George. These people want to use our tax money in the name of helping people. It's just a way to spend other people's money. The county already has a $40 million project, our new courthouse. If it was just your money, I would not care, but it's our money. Please pay down the debt. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Got one online? Okay.
Good evening, Ryan McGill, Shiloh District. I wanted to first thank Cyrus with Open Roads Renewables for reaching out and coordinating a productive meeting last week. I believe he will cover some changes in the conditions that came from our meeting. While these changes are helpful, I did want to address a few comments that the board had at the last meeting. Supervisor Collins, you mentioned at the last meeting that the fire department has gotten busier. In fact, you stated you heard them go out 5 times that day. I did some research and you are correct, sir. Between 2019 and 2024, the fire department call volume has gone up approximately 15%. Additionally, when comparing January 2025 call volume to January 2024 call volume, there's been a year-over-year increase of 7%. The increase in fire department call volume is important to consider when the board looks at future projects that will increase public safety response, such as the Pyramid Treatment Facility and the proposed BESS facility. As call volume continues to rise, the fire department staffing has to increase to meet the increasing needs of the community. Just think, if there were an incident at the proposed BESS facility that required a long duration response, how would that impact the fire department's ability to respond to the growing number of 911 calls? Supervisor Sullins, you brought up the point of wind direction should there be a fire at the BESS facility. I believe this is a legitimate concern. As I mentioned in my public comment last meeting, firefighters use a guidebook called the ERG when responding to hazardous materials responses. This guide helps firefighters determine the evacuation distance based on the type of chemical involved, wind direction, and time of day. The time of day matters because the evacuation distance increases at night due to a drop in barometric pressure. Supervisor Stroud, it was nice talking with you the other day at Food Lion. At the last board meeting, you did mention that our military needs a secure power supply to conduct their mission, and the BES project would help support the Dahlgren base. I couldn't agree with you more, sir. The military institutions are also looking at ways to secure their power supply. In fact, DoD recognized the critical need for our military bases to get off the domestic power grid and have begun to develop their own energy infrastructure, with already having 30 microgrids established as of October 2023. I bring this up because I do not believe the BESS project will be as valuable to the base when they establish their own microgrid. And we shouldn't place too much weight on their energy needs, as their needs will change. I believe the primary focus should be the economic impact to King George, along with the health and safety impact to our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, this time I will close public comment, and we'll go to reports of members of the board. Lee, do you have anything today?
No, nothing for today. Thank you.
Mr. Collins?
Good evening. Thank you. Some of the public comment that came this evening. Mr. Greenwood, just wanted to address specifically when you mentioned that the supervisors are all on board with these projects. That's not really an accurate statement. Probably on board with some and not others. There's several projects that are coming before us, the battery storage, the solar project that covers most of Shiloh district, it looks like. That was a sarcastic comment. It covers a lot of land out there. And if you go down the road, you'll see all the public hearing signs on both sides of Route 3, Stony Knoll, Big Timber, Round Hill. It's quite a project. And then you have the Green Energy Ventures project. And then in regards to that project, it's been always under my understanding there's 2 stories for the whole project. The height, when you go to the 3 stories, I know the amount of feet. I would not be interested in a 3-story buildings. And I think I've said that before. And then there's the other project going on down in Dahlgren, Dahlgren West, I think they call it. And then there's some other ones that are in the pipeline in the community development. So these projects will be, by at least myself, will be looked at in an independent, what's best for the community and what the community wants. Ms. Level, thank you. Good to see you again. There is a $40 million debt, and I don't want to pay it, and I don't want you to pay it, but we have to pay it. So we'll work on that. Now, so when going over the warrants, I spent 2 hours with Mr. Smolnick today, and I had about, I don't know, you say 20 different items, but the ones, and he's going to look into those, but the ones I want to bring up the most are the energy costs. The energy costs, so if you all recall last month, I fussed about $10,000 power bill for the library. Well, this month it's 14,000. So that's $24,000 for that building for 2 months of an electric bill. You have other buildings in the county that have the same amount of square feet and the same ceiling heights where their power bill is 3,000, 4,000. I understand it was checked into. Is there has to be a problem. That's all I can say. There's a problem. If they're using heat strips, we know with that, everybody knows that when it gets below 30 degrees, heat strips come on and all you're doing is running electric heat. I wonder what schedule. So in your Dominion bill, if you look at your bill on the right-hand side, it tells you where they buy the power from. On the left-hand side, it tells you your peak. So your bill is decided. So if you look at your bill and you see the peak, that number comes from every half an hour that the electric company takes a picture of your meter. At the highest number through those half an hours, then you are charged the rate for the highest usage of that 24-hour period of 30 minutes. So the example that I like to, so the schools are on an energy management program, and what that does is, let me give you an example as far as real world. So your house, so you have a washer, you have a dryer, you have a dishwasher, you have the big appliances, heat, air conditioning, water, hot water. So you get up in the morning and you put in, you get in a shower, so the hot water is going. You have the heat on, the heat's doing. You don't throw a load in laundry until you get out. That's how you manage it. The schools are managed with controls, so you never know that anything's going on. So the feeling of the heat is the same, but it's not always on. It'll ramp up before they come to school, and when they get to school, it ramps down. You're still feeling the same climate control, but then they're going to the bathroom when they get there, so the hot water is ramped up. So that's in a different 30-minute. So that's how you save money. And the same thing goes with energy management. Also, I would like to know, so there's a schedule for every business, organization, residential, industrial that Dominion has. You're on a schedule, A through F. A through F has sub numbers, A1, A5, A6, so on. The schedule for industrial, commercial, public buildings is less than we pay as customers for our homes. So I found when I was on the school board that the schools were all on different schedules. Well, they should be on the same schedule, and you can negotiate the schedule with the power company. That's a big take. You can actually go in there and negotiate what schedule you're going to be in. So of course we want to be the least for our power usage. Secondly, the propane bills for a month, and this is the water service and the all the county. So if you look at the warrants, you'll notice that propane usage in King George is crazy. That's for heating and other things. You can also, some commercial people, are we paying the commercial rate, or are we paying what you and I pay at home? You know, $2, $3, $4 a gallon, whatever. The commercial rate is a lot less. And so we need to, if we're not, we need to look at other providers. Mr. Smolnick said we own the tanks, so we can get propane for the least costs. That was correct? Incorrect? We lease them, so every month we're paying a certain amount of money for all these propane tanks.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. I spoke with Mr. Muncy. We lease the tanks. Mr. Muncy, they were able to negotiate a better rate. I've got it written down in my notes. What page was that on? I'm sorry. Do you have a page?
For the AmeriGas,
Yes.
let me go through my notes.
I want to make sure I give you the correct information, sir. Eight. And the detail, I'm looking for the detailed. AmeriGas, here it is, page 7 on the detailed. So notes for, they are rental tanks. We pay $2.99 a gallon versus the $5.99 a gallon that I believe it used to be. Mr. Muncie said this was negotiated down from $5.99 a gallon to $2.99. So I do not know if that is a commercial rate. He thought it was. Just, based on the time where I got this question, I could not confirm whether or not this is in fact a commercial rate, but you rent the tanks, $2.99 a gallon.
So when was the $5.99 a gallon? When was that?
I don't have a specific time whenever we used to pay $5.99 a gallon.
So $2.99 a gallon, the commercial rate. I'm familiar with a business that pays $1 a gallon, the commercial rate, because they use 10,000 gallons a month. So if you look at what we have in this county, we use way more than 10,000 gallons a month for propane. If you look at all of the combined, so when you go through all the AmeriGas bills and you put those all together, and then the Dominion Energy bills, put those together, it's a quite a large sum of money. So if we can find out what schedules we're on, could we put on the agenda for a negotiation of a better price for propane?
See no issue with that.
Okay. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the leased vehicles. I spoke with Mr. Smolnick today, and if you look at our leased vehicles, you can go in the warrants and look at it. You can see what the payments are. Seems to be a little expensive. We could buy a vehicle, get more out of it than a lease vehicle at the price we're paying. So look at the warrants and you'll see what I mean. The other things, Mr. Smolnick, did you have any, do you want me to jump into any of those? Do you have any answers for any of those other questions?
If you have any questions, I've got answers to any of the questions that you asked me today. So anything you'd like me to answer, I'm here.
So you have the answer to all those questions today?
I think I worked with finance and we worked and we crunched them out. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the court-appointed attorney, in our warrants, we're paying for court-appointed attorneys. Well, it's in the payout. Are we paying for it? Is the state reimbursing us? What's the deal on that?
So I believe you're referring to page 15 in the detailed warrant analysis.
14.
We have I think 14 and travels on to 15. Yes, 14 and 15. So let's see, the funds are collected from the defendants and they're reimbursed to the county. So these are the fees to pay for these attorneys. They comes out of the combined courts. The funds are collected from defendants and reimbursed to the county.
So those that said court appointed, so usually when they're court appointed, they don't pay themselves.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, if they're given a court-appointed attorney, it's because they're indigent and can't afford to hire one. And if they're found guilty, those costs are taxed against them. If they're found innocent, they're not, my recollection of it. So anybody who's found guilty, they would have to reimburse that.
So the ones on the warrants weren't found guilty and we had to pay for those? Okay.
So we pay, they were reimbursed by the state was the answer from finance director.
Page 15 on Coben Technologies.
Okay. So Coban Technologies, the charges here, these are cloud storage in the vehicles for the sheriff's office. And then they are, Cogent Communications is the Nexus Cloud subscription. So between Cogent Communications and Coban, it's a subscription cost plus a storage cost. And you'll see that there are 3 credits here. So 3 of those line items are credits, not charges.
Okay, thank you. How do I tell if it's a credit?
It has the minus sign next to it.
Okay.
So the one like 7392 for Coban, that was a charge. When you go down to the next one, it's a 60 with a minus after it. That would be a credit.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Washington, page 18, Dixie, Washington, $1,520 twice.
These are for there's, I guess you can call them 2 different suites on the same floor down the street. One is occupied by the county's IT department. The other is occupied by the engineering department.
So I hope that we'll be able to get out of, put those people in somewhere else, so we won't be paying $3,000. And also, we're also paying a lot of money for Mr. Franklin's social services building, so hopefully we can get that owned by the county. I'm gonna go all the way to page 40. Rappahannock area on youth.
So there are several checks here for Rappahannock area on youth. They're behind in sending their bills to Daniel Hicks. These charges represent the last quarter of calendar year 2024. So this is not 1 month. They were waiting on it. We got invoices for all of October, November, and December.
So the invoices for what?
Do we have those? I looked at them this afternoon. They were based on, I think it was a billable per hour EIP services.
I don't know what EIP is.
IEP? I think is it.
IEP?
I think.
I know what an IEP is.
1 second, sir.
BCI. What is it? It's the ankle bracelet. So we're paying for that? The county is paying for that?
These are, Mr. Collins, I will find out whether or not these are reimbursable costs or not. I found out what they were, what the time frame was for, but whether or not they're reimbursable, I will find that out and get back to you.
Okay. Usually these ankle bracelets, in order to do it, you got to pay for the cost of it. I would imagine it would be the same for youth. I will stop at that. I have a whole notebook full of stuff. So no, the chairman told me I only had 3 minutes today. So I think I've taken that up. Thank you all so much. It's good to see everyone out. It's good to see everyone out for the projects are coming, the projects that are here, and the future of the county. So thanks everyone for coming out. And I see that we have a large viewing online these days. And also there's large viewing after the meeting's up. They go on YouTube. So I can encourage everyone to pay attention, to stay off of Facebook, and to read the agendas and the stuff to see what the truth is. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to go a little bit beyond 3.
Collins, for your due diligence. Thank you for your due diligence.
Ms. Stroud.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, everybody came out and spoke tonight. Thank Mr. Is it Greenwich? Greenwood. Jason Greenwood, Shiloh. So I can tell you're pretty fired up about something, which is good. We need people that get involved in things. I would ask you though to go look at some of our previous meetings where we've been discussing these things, and it's been out there. So it's not all the time new that people all of a sudden the light comes on and it's new to them and they get fired up about it. But it's been discussed. We've discussed it, and we've been talking about it for months or for a long time. And so these matters are pretty well down the road, especially the solar matter, which is in predominantly in Shiloh. But you know, your comments are taken as everybody's are. One of the things that you said was what do the property owners benefit? So, you know, I'm not focused on the people that own the property that are putting something there. I'm not focused on them making money. You know, that's up to them. They negotiate. I mean, people own their property, and if they're legally can do what they want on their property, then legally they can do it. But what the county has to benefit, because you were talking about putting this stuff on county property and such, and how it impacts the citizens, is that if these things bring money to the county, then they help pay the county's debt, which is our debt, and they help pay the bills that keep the citizens from being taxed more. So they help keep your taxes low, which are lower than any of the surrounding counties already. They help keep them low. And you heard some of the discussion tonight about the increase for the fire department, 7% year over year. So as the demands on county services increase, then there needs to be money to pay for those. So without going to the citizens to pay more property taxes, individual taxes, we need businesses or somebody to help pick that up. And that's where these projects bring money in. That's the benefit to them, is bringing the money into the county to do that. Okay. I'm not talking about the safety. I'm not talking about any other things that were addressed. I'm just talking about we need businesses, we need industry, we need these things here to bring money into the county so the citizens ought to pick up that burden. So all the other matters will be discussed at length, and there's still public debate and such like that on them, which you're more than welcome to come and talk and make your cases there, as everybody will. I think I'm in there. Sure. Thank you.
Bender.
Thank you very much. So those in the audience, thank you for coming out. Mr. Greenwood, I did speak to you this week, and I had quite a few phone calls from residents concerning the battery solar, Gibson solar battery storage, and the down zoning, whatever you want to call it. I fielded a lot of phone calls in the last 2 weeks. I do want to thank Cyrus and his staff. They did reach out to me. They sent a long email and to address some of the concerns I had. And as he knew, I was very upfront with him the whole time. I'm still a no, because one of the biggest things, and those that have watched me for the last 8 years know that I try to do what I feel is the best in listening to the citizens, everything. And to me, I still have a lot of questions, especially on the fire and rescue and whether we can handle something if there was a fire. And so I look at it a little bit as, you know, is the revenue really the benefit of the environmental concerns and the other? And if you look at it over 40 years, you know, battery storage might not even be around in 40 years, just the way technology moves. And so the cost benefit to me is not there. And so I feel strongly for that. And I'm a no. So I'm very upfront and honest with that. That's just one of all the projects that really concern me the most, especially with all the battery fires you see and the research that I have done on it. So I just wanted to be, I do listen, and I can change my opinion, but I've thought long and hard about it, and I'm a no still. So I wanted to say that right now, you know, as later the vote is coming. I wanted to also bring up, you might have heard my phone ring for a minute. Sorry about that. My daughter's playing basketball. Levita's daughter's soon going to be playing for varsity, and it's their last game, so I was getting updates. But why the call was is because school's closed tomorrow. So to those of you that are here, obviously they're anticipating the storm. So that was the KG alert saying, hey, the schools are out today. So just to let you know, if you didn't catch your phone, schools are out. I got many things to talk about later with the service authority related. I'll bring those up in the service authority portion. So I am done. Thank you.
Mr. Sullins?
Thanks. I think everything that I would say has pretty much been covered at least twice now. So I would just echo again, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I appreciate your involvement. Please stay involved. And as far as reports go, really no formal meetings over the last 2-week period to talk about. Have fielded a bunch of phone calls and emails, mostly about the topics at hand. And I got to have a kind of an informal meeting with a couple members of the school board and Mr. Stroud yesterday. So we're working on making sure we maintain strong relations between the two boards, and communications back and forth as far as the budget and the new school building and things like that. So I don't know that we solved world hunger or anything along those lines, but probably the biggest outcome was ask for another joint session between the two boards, but it was some great fellowship. So I appreciate Ms. Hoover from the school board for requesting that meeting, and let's get about the business.
Thank you. All I'll say is just thank you people for coming out today, everyone. Just thank you for whether you agree with people on the board on what they think. It doesn't matter as far as just your participation matters and the fact that you care enough to show up. And I just encourage people to watch meetings periodically. You can pull up the agendas are easy to print off. You don't have to sit through a whole YouTube video. You can pull up every agenda and just take a look at what's going on. You might see some things on there that interest you. So just keep that in your mind. That way you're not too surprised by things when they come up. For us, it's hard. It's, you try to be as transparent as possible, and everything's out there for months at a time. And we use alert systems that send out when meetings are happening, other things. So if you're not signed up to those things, please do get signed up to them. So I will close this now. We'll move on to the consent agenda. But, all right.
Sorry about that. You brought up a good point with the minutes and the agendas. A lot of people have expressed that they don't like watching the meetings because they don't want to spend 5 hours watching YouTube. If you print the agenda, or I'm sorry, the minutes out from the previous meeting, everything is timestamped. So go in that PDF, do a word search for whatever topic we were talking about, and then you can go on YouTube and fast forward to whatever that timestamp is. And now you don't have to sit through 5 hours of craziness. So that's all.
Mr. Smarter, on the consent agenda, I don't see the meeting minutes.
Yes, good point. And I had a conversation with Mr. Stewart about this. There was a delay in the delivery. Confirmed this with Ms. Fish. That's why they're not in this particular meeting packet. We will have both of them next meeting for you all.
All right. So does anyone have any discussion points about the consent agenda?
Yes, sir. So you've heard my discussion in regards to the general fund. Everything else I'm good with. The general fund, I would be a no on that one particular thing because of some of these questions. Thank you.
I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion properly second. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So my discussion was that the reason why I tried to head off that was so I could approve, so I could vote yes to everything else except for the general fund. But it's in one big packet now. So when you made the motion, it was seconded, then mine will have to be a no because of the general fund.
Yes.
Just so everybody knows, you can remove something from the block if Mr. Collins wants to make a motion to remove that item from the block, and then you all can vote on the remainder if Mrs. Bender wants to withdraw her motion, or you can just go forward and he can vote no on the whole thing. But there is an option not to have to vote no on the block if he wants.
He has a lot of questions about the general fund. Removing that today, what's the effect is that going to have?
Mr. Chairman, you just vote on that issue separately, and he can just vote no on that one issue instead of having to vote no on the whole block.
I'll withdraw my motion and make another motion. I make a motion to approve 0210 02-1002, 02-1003, 02-1004, 02-1005, and 02-1006 as presented.
The second one.
In a block.
Second.
In a block.
Motion properly second. Is there any further discussion? By roll call, Mr. Collins,
Yay.
Mr. Stroud,
Aye.
Ms. Bender,
Aye.
Mr. Sullins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes.
I will make a second motion to approve 02-1001 as presented. That's the general fund.
Second.
Motion properly second. Is there any further discussion?
I have discussion on it, sir. So, if I understand it correctly, by us, even if, like, the bills are there, in other words, we've already been billed, so we're still gonna have to pay, but that doesn't hinder us from going back and either, one, trying to get, whoever the vendor was, trying to negotiate a better deal or something better. And if we can't get it for the last bill, at least get it for the future bill. So, in other words, it doesn't keep us from still working it, even though we have to pay the bill that we're billed today. And is that understood? Right. All right. I'm done.
Anyone else? By roll call, Mr. Collins,
Nay.
Mr. Stroud,
Aye.
Ms. Bender,
Aye.
Mr. Sullins.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Do we have any constitutional officers that'd like to speak? No? All right, we'll move on to the Board of Directors.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion properly seconded. Any further discussion? Mr. Collins, you have any questions on the consent agenda? All right. With that, I'll do a roll call vote. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Collins?
Aye.
Sully?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Next up, we have a presentation by Andrew Grossnickel with Robinson, Farmer, and Cox, the King George Service Authority audit. Hot off the presses.
Okay. Thank you for your time. This will be the first of my two presentations this evening. This will be the Service Authority, and then this will be back up here in a few minutes for the county. Just want to take a few moments to go over the results of our audit for the year ended June 30th, 2024 for the Service Authority. So you engaged us to perform a financial statement audit and compliance report for the authority for the year ended June 30th, 2024. That audit was subject to the auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America, the specifications for audits of authorities, boards, and commissions issued by the Auditor of Public Accounts for Virginia, and the standards for financial audits contained in government auditing standards by the Comptroller General of the United States. The main byproduct of our audit process are our independent auditors' reports that are included in the annual comprehensive financial report. For the Service Authority, we have two such reports. The first is the independent auditor's report. That report is on the numbers themselves in the financial statements. And on that report, we issued an unmodified or a clean report in layman's terms on the Service Authority financials. The second report that's contained on the Service Authority annual comprehensive financial report that is an auditor type report is the internal control over financial reporting and on compliance. This is referred to sometimes as the Yellow Book report. If you hear say, hey, we had a Yellow Book audit conducted. Also government auditing standards report, sometimes referred to as that. In this report, we would note any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in controls. We did not report any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in controls for the Service Authority. Just a couple, and I'm sorry for my voice. I do not have the flu that's going around, but I do have a little bug, and I also was coaching youth basketball for much of the weekend and giving instruction. Lost my voice a little bit. The net position, I'm going to go over a couple financial highlights for the Service Authority for June 30th, 2024. The Service Authority is on a full accrual basis, so it has all of the assets and all of the liabilities included in all of the financial statements. It's just on that one basis. The residual for the Service Authority is referred to as net position, so that's their retained earnings essentially, or their equity. On that basis, the net position at June 30th, 2024 for the Service Authority was $26,053,063. And that was an increase in net position from the year prior of about $2.1 million. The operating income for the year ended June 30th, 2024 for the Service Authority was about $1.55 million. I have a slide here that just presents a 4-year or 5-year comparison here on the change in net position. You can see that from 2020, where there was just an increase of $365,330 in that position, the last 3 years, that increase has been over $2 million, with this year being a change in net position of a positive $2.1 million. And then lastly, I have a little chart here that goes and shows you the operating revenues and expenses for the Service Authority in a little line graph over the last 5 years as well. Again, demonstrating that the operating revenues have outpaced the operating expenses, which is obviously what you're looking to have happen on a business type entity like the Service Authority. And with that, I'd take any questions on the Service Authority audit and financial statements.
Mr. Davis?
How much of are we paying towards the debt?
So in 2024, the debt service payments, you bear with me for just a moment. The debt service payments were approximately $1 million in principal and approximately $570,000 in interest when you're talking the actual debt service payments on bonds, notes, lease agreements, things of that nature. There are other long-term obligations like pension, other post-employment benefits, but on the hard obligations, that's how much you paid in principal and interest payments in 2024.
Thank you.
Jumping on that, does that also include the line of credit we paid off?
That line of credit was paid off subsequent to June 30th, 2024. Okay. Actually, a little bit was drawn on that during 2024 fiscal year, and it was paid off, I believe, in August or sometime in the late summer, early fall.
I just wanted to point that out because it would not reflect in there, but we did pay off that line of credit.
Yep, that was paid off in the current fiscal year and will show up as a reduction in the debt service in fiscal year 25.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? Thank you. That one was easy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You always do a thorough job. Next up is Bowden Monthly Report. Mr. Mark Bowden from Bowden Environmental Services.
All right. Good evening, members of the board. Good to be with you. All right, we'll start off with the water side, as we always do. All right, just some operational notes that we'd like to go over before I take any questions. There was an air release valve replaced on filter 2 at the Fairview Beach Water Treatment Facility. A new injector installed on the raw water line at Canterbury. Saftwell had a chemical feed pump replaced, and we also replaced the transducer for the Oakland Sealston Water Tower. For the wastewater side, there's many things to note for the 5 different wastewater plants. For Dahlgren, there was a conveyor belt for the sludge press that was replaced or repaired. There was some freezing issues that we had to deal with on the water reuse booster pump. Those had to be dealt with. There was a new UV light installation that is ongoing. There was some issues that have sprouted from that endeavor, and I think we'll be getting into those a little bit later on in either this discussion or next. Hop yard, there was some electrical issues on the influent auger that we had to address. And then also there was a motor pulled on one of the blowers for SBR number 1. There was a site visit by ACE, apologies. They're doing the decommissioning project for the Perkins Corner. They came and did a site visit to look at the project limits. There was a permit exceedance for TSS. This is an ongoing issue, and it is a direct result of the disc filter being non-effective. We have scheduled a visit from the manufacturer of that disc filter to do an evaluation for us. We are trying to limp Perkins along until the decommissioning takes place. Until that time, we are still bound by a permit, and we are doing everything within the treatment plant's existing capabilities and future capabilities to maintain compliance with our permit. At Oakland, we had to replace a chemical feed line that had been crushed, and then also the Service Authority has contracted a welder to do some on-site welding on the equalization basin metal tank structures. PMs were performed on the blowers at Fairview, and we also made some operational changes to mitigate some loading from the pre-EQ. So a lot of detail there, but happy to take any questions if you all have any.
Does anybody have any questions? No questions? All right, continue on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That's it for my report.
I want to thank you, and once again, and also our maintenance staff. They've done a lot of work. Cold weather is not very pleasant for water and wastewater facilities, for lines and plants. So this time of the year, there's a lot of repairs that are done. And so I just want to thank everyone to keep our water flowing and to make sure that we don't, to the best of our can, especially with Perkins, with the consent order. I do want to bring up, before we go to the next part, the change orders. Our consent order is lovely Valentine's Day present. They've signed our consent order. So Perkins and Oakland Park are under consent order. So everybody knew about that. That's the one we've been waiting for. They did sign it. So we are officially under that consent order. So next up is a change order for the Potomac Landing Well. Mr. Chris Connolly, Engineering Board Report. And this has to do with the ARPA funds.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. I appreciate your time today to present the proposed change order for the new well at Potomac Landing. While I understand that change orders often raise concerns about cost overruns, I do want to emphasize that this request is a direct response to the unforeseen geological conditions that were encountered at the current depth that the well driller made it to. During the initial drilling of the well to the planned depth of 380 feet, we encountered unexpected geological conditions. The conditions at this depth lack sufficient permeability and do not contain screenable material that will be suitable for water production. Some of the geological findings, I think you all should have a picture of the representative samples at 10-foot intervals. If you look at that, you see a lot of silt, clay, packed sand. None of that is that suitable material for the well driller. On the one example, I believe it's at 360 feet. Sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, at the 360-foot mark, you can see a clump of packed sand there. Now, next to that, in those lines, there is that's what the sand should look like for it to be a suitable production well. That's not anywhere in these current depths. So from that, basically it means the well at its current contracted depth cannot provide the 95 gallons per minute per the contract requirements. For that, the contractor has agreed to honor their unit pricing and continue drilling until sufficient water flow is found, not to exceed a depth of 550 feet. Those unit costs were $190 per vertical foot for the drilling and $55 per vertical foot for 6 inches of the 6-inch casing. The total for these adjustments, which I also believe you have in front of you, the change order from the contractor, totaling $41,650. The original contract value was $187,000, and the updated contract total with those adjustments would bring it to $228,650. The recommended action from the staff is to authorize the Service Authority Board of Directors to execute a change order to the original agreement for Toano Well and Pump to continue drilling for a suitable water source not to exceed 550 feet.
And just a clarification on this, you've been out there watching it. DQ even was there, correct?
Yes, they were.
And then previously, they used the number of the well, the current well that we're drilling to replace, correct? And sometimes based on geological, whatever's in the ground, because I think we know space a little bit more than the ground, that sometimes this can happen. I know in my own experience, when we drilled our well, they had to go even deeper because they couldn't find that 95 gallons. My well is almost 800 feet in the ground.
You're absolutely correct, yes.
I know some of my colleagues probably have some questions on it. So who wants it? Mr. Sullins, would you like to go first?
Sure. How do we know we're going to find water?
So,
Or let me rephrase it. How do we know that we're going to find it at 550 feet and not have to go to 800 feet and just keep coming back? Is there some kind of assurance that we're going to get something back?
So, you know, it's unseen conditions. Nobody's been down to that depth there at that particular site. Now, surrounding wells in the area suggest that closer to 500 feet is that mark for this. Now, this well that Ms. Bender mentioned was, you know, it's 10 feet away, and the geological conditions in just that span either have changed since the original report from 1986, or there was some inaccurate data captured at that point. So to answer your question, how do we know we're going to find it? You know, I can't say for certain. I can say all the data that we have since I've been out there suggests that we'll be there with that 500-foot mark.
I'll let Mr. Davis, and then I know Mr. Collins has a lot of questions, so we'll go with Mr. Davis first.
All right. So what if you find the water before the 550? I mean, we're paying to go 550, correct? So not to exceed 550, but what if you find the water before the 550?
Are you asking if there would be a credit involved with it?
Yes.
So based off the unit pricing that they provided, if they go another 30 feet, then find that water source. That's why we're able to, that's why the original bid was asked for unit pricing, so we could kind of gauge it at that step increase as we get there. Now going down to that, the depth that's in front of you, that's the suggested depth, or that's the more reasonable depth where a water source would be based off information from when DEQ was out there, from the well driller, from the other sites surrounding this area. Again, not at this particular site.
There's a chance that they wouldn't have to go. There's a chance they wouldn't have to go 550, 550 feet. At that point in time,
they could go to 460, 480.
But would money come back? Would this number be reduced?
At that point, yes, we could go forward with a credit to the contractor based off of their unit pricing model that they provided initially.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Collins?
Thank you. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you, Mr. Collins?
Good. So who decided how many feet? The engineer?
Yes, sir. The engineer did initially based off of the report that was available to them for the existing well that's out there. That report that was done when that well was drilled back in 1986.
So an engineer said you need to go down 380 feet, you're going to find water. And that bid was based upon that, right?
Yes, sir.
So when the engineer is wrong, he's kind of like an attorney. If they lose, they still get paid?
I think the engineering work was done some time ago. And again, using the information they had available at the time was how these bid documents were initially developed for the contractor to submit their proposal off of.
But other wells in that area are 550 to find the 90 gallons. So this engineer decided they didn't need to go with any other wells in the area. Was going to go with the 380. And then here we come with a change order. So you know how I feel about change orders.
I can share that sentiment.
So there's something wrong when we are at the point we're at now. So the rig is up. They've drilled 300 and some feet.
Correct.
So they would have to continue to do it. Did the contractor have anything to do with determining the amount of feet, or is it just the engineer?
The amount of
Mr. Young is mouthing something back there.
Mr. Young does have more material, and Mr. Wasabi did reach out to the engineering firm because it was not, I just want to clarify for the public, it wasn't our county engineer, it is a contracted service that, and I think it was from 2021, correct?
I believe it was 2021, and the 380-foot number was based on the existing drilling logs from the well that is literally about 10 foot away. And that's how that number was based on, and we, well, I say we, but the contracted engineer selected that depth because we don't want to bid out 400-foot well. If you bid out a well that's deeper than you anticipate having to go, then it's typically a higher price because it's a higher risk when you get to those kind of depths.
So the 380 feet of the current well, we already know that was full of sand. So why wouldn't we determine that if we drilled another well, which is about 10 feet from the other one, that at 380 foot, you'd hit sand? Same thing.
The reason the existing well has sand in it is because of a massive screen failure.
Massive what?
Screen failure. The screen failed and allowed the well to pump sand and fill in.
So we're paying engineers to give us numbers that don't matter. I'm not giving you all any trouble. I just want you to know that. I'm not fussing at you all, okay? But we're paying engineers, I'll look over this way. We're paying engineers that give us bad information over and over again. We've paid engineers for this county that have given us bad information over and over again. And I thought we were on track for that not going on anymore. But I see that this well and the other well they're drilling, there's going to be another change order.
And Mr. Collins, to clarify, one of the things we've noticed as we've gone on, and Mr. Wasabi can confirm this, and Mr. Smolnik, that we might need to, when our contracts are up for some of these engineering services, we really need to relook at picking different engineering services for, and a lot of this stuff is previous to my role here. It was done in the previous general manager and different circumstances. And as you remember, the board of directors didn't really receive the same information you do now in the past, and the county board of supervisors. So
2021 was the engineer that gave the report. And if this is the report that he gives, I would close the business with him immediately because it's all obviously not good information.
Well, that would be a question for Mr. Stewart as our
Even from
county
our
attorney.
engineer and our, sir, I don't know what the name of your job is. Construction manager.
Mhm.
So I'll end it with that, but we need to close these gaps in.
And I know this contract is up, correct, in July, our contracted services. I think that is correct.
I believe it terminates in July unless we renew, and right now the plan is to go back out.
Yeah, and Mr. Smolnik, we've discussed this, so I would.
So for the board's knowledge and for the public, so I looked at the original RFP that was sent out to acquire the on-call consulting engineers, and the request was very broad in nature. It was looking for a firm who could do it and just what I can remember: civil engineering, traffic engineering, geotech, structural, MEP, a very wide, broad. What I've sent to procurement and to the engineering team last week is a way that I wrote an RFP back in 2018, and you break it out into buckets where you have group one is transportation engineering, group two is MEP, group three is structural. So that way, whenever you put it out to bid, you can have firms who are MEP aficionados bid just on that group. You can have the traffic engineers who just do traffic engineering, just bid on that group. That way you get the cream of the crop. You're going to get, a wider sample size to choose from. And then you get the best MEP engineers. You get the best structural engineers, because the way it was worded, in my opinion, it was a very, very broad brush. And if I had a structural engineering firm, I probably would not have bid on that because I knew I could not do the other disciplines requested in it. So I believe these are up at the end of this fiscal year. And I've already, talked to procurement engineering. When we redo the RFP, we will look to break it into specific groups to make sure that we get at least 2 firms for each discipline for on-call services.
Thank you, Mr. Smolek. Mr. Collins, does that answer part of your question?
Yes, ma'am. When the dog poops in the house, you don't get rid of the dog. So they're already 380 feet down, so you can't stop it now. So, but I bring this concern to y'all. We have talked about it, and I just get so tired of it. I'm not blaming you guys. I just want to make sure that's clear. But we got to get some engineers that give us the information that we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Solons?
Just making sure I understand right. This well is about 10 feet from the old well, right? The old well was about 300 and some odd feet. So it seemed to make sense that we might find water there. Would the depth be impacted by the fact that the aquifer is running low? Would that change the depth that we have to go?
There is a potential of the aquifer being drained in that area, but I don't believe it's being impacted quite that dramatically in that area. I think more than likely the bore logs were not necessarily correct on, so the information attached to that well might not have been correct.
Okay, no worries.
And that's all hindsight.
And did I understand correctly that if you had bid it out, it's kind of the opposite of what you would expect for asking for, paying volume. So if you'd bid it out for 500 feet, that probably would have cost us more per foot than doing this change order and having them agree to the original thing. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Then I don't understand why we're frustrated with these guys. It sounds like the engineers are doing a good job. I don't understand why we're frustrated with them. It sounds like they're doing a good job.
Who are you referring to frustrated? I'm not frustrated with the contractor. I'm not frustrated with our staff. I'm frustrated with the engineers saying, you go down this amount of feet and you're going to get the water. There's a report, but there's other boring in the area that says you have to go down 550. So they completely ignored that. And they're getting paid to just tell you that what.
But by ignoring that, they actually saved us money. It would have cost more per linear foot if they had bid it out at 500 feet than it did this way. I don't know that they meant to do that, but yay.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense either.
Coming from an engineer. So, Mr. Davis. Lee, did you have any?
No, I think all the questions asked covered anything I would have said.
And I know they're right now that's just sitting there waiting for our decision to go further, and we have to do it. Do I have any motion?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
before, and I'll just bring this to your attention and you all do what you would like. The way the change order is written, it says drill borehole from 380 feet to 550 feet or suitable water source for a defined price. I read that as it could go up to 850 feet for $32,000. And I don't read it as getting a credit if they only have to go to 395 feet. The second thing, the casing, it says to go 6-inch steel casing from 360 to 530 feet, which I assume is a typo. So I think you all should make your motion clear as to what you want to do and we can get this corrected.
So the borehole is what would go to 550 feet. The casing stops short of that, about 20 feet. The same applies for the current site, 380 feet, and then the screenable would be at 360.
So then if that's okay, it's okay, but the first part's still unclear. And I don't see where you would receive a credit in this change order.
That's a good catch. How would you rephrase that for a motion?
Drill the borehole up to 550 feet as necessary to find a suitable water source for the unit price already agreed to of, and I don't know what that unit price was.
That was how it was meant to read. I apologize if it came across different, but it was meant to read until suitable water source is found up to not to exceed 550 foot. Does that make sense?
And I know, Madam Chair, I know that's what everybody intended. It's just not what it says.
Yeah, right.
If you read it, it's just not what it says. It says, or suitable water source, and I see no limitation in it, but by the same token, I don't see where you get a credit if they only have to drill it another 20 feet.
Yeah. Would somebody like to take a stab at that motion? I'm nominating you, Sally.
You disagree?
Robotham, would you like to try?
Sure. So I think it's, let's see, authorize the, I make a motion to authorize the Service Authority Board of Directors designee to execute a change order to agreement to authorize Tano Well and Pump Service to continue drilling until a suitable water source is found up to 550 feet.
Okay.
And I would just include for the unit cost of $100 per vertical foot and $55 per vertical foot of 6-inch casing.
So up to 550 feet for the unit cost of $190 per vertical foot and $55 per vertical foot of 6-inch casing.
I think that's good.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion properly seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Robotham?
Aye.
Mr. Collins?
Aye with reservations.
Mr. Sullins?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Next up is the change order for the replacement of the UV lights for the Dahlgren wastewater treatment plant. And this needs a little explanation because there was an error by the engineering firm that measured it.
Yes, and I will get to that in here.
And Mr. Young, before you continue, for the audience, one of the things you got to remember is these permits on the wastewater plants. The permits state the operations have to run and not get any violations, and you have to follow the operating manual. And so this directly affects the nutrients were allotted at that plant and the operations manual. So, Mr. Young.
Yeah. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm presenting the Dahlgren Wastewater Treatment Plant UV Light Purchase Order Amendment. Upon installation of the replacement Dahlgren Wastewater Treatment Plant UV lights, it was discovered plans called for 10 UV disinfection bulbs per bank, while 12 UV disinfection bulbs per bank are required. There are 2 banks in the system. 1 or 2 disinfection bulb banks have been installed completely, and an additional 4 UV bulbs and hardware are required for completion of the second bank of bulbs at a cost of $28,547.05. The original PO was in the amount of $120,000. Improvisions have been made to allow the wastewater treatment plant to continue operating on a temporary basis to meet regulatory requirements. I would like to add we are currently in errors and omissions discussions with contracted engineering company. And I'll answer any questions you have.
Before I answer the question, I do want to thank Emboded in their quick work to find a solution so that we stayed in compliance, and our maintenance staff for doing the best they could to make it work, and also understand the lights that they took out. Some of them still work, and they're going to be used at Oakland Park and Perkins, so that we don't have to purchase new ones, especially for Perkins, since that plant will be decommissioned. So, any questions, Mr. Sullins?
So can you go back and explain where the mistake was made?
Ultimately, the mistake was made by a mismeasurement. And a little history, this project was started before I was here, quite a few years back, by one engineering company. And those plans that were originally drawn up but not completed were then passed on to the second engineering company that we are working with now. And I believe it was not confirmed in the field. So the mismeasurement was the width of the channel that these bulbs are actually going into. And because that width was 36 inches in real life, 3 foot, but it is marked on the plans as 30 inches. So that's what we're sorting through now, and I'm in conversations with the engineering company about errors and omissions.
So the original contractor mismeasured it. They're no longer serving us. The new contractor didn't verify it, and now we have the 25% cost overrun.
We do, and it would be, we're pursuing reimbursement.
Okay.
I directed Mr. Young to send a letter to the engineering company because it was their error. And is the original company even exist anymore, or was it bought out?
They do exist.
They do exist. And this goes back many years ago, and probably 2 general managers ago when this process was started. And these lights are important because when DEQ did their recon inspection, their annual, they dinged us again for those lights not functioning properly. So they have to be replaced because DEQ is getting tired of putting that on their recon report. Correct?
Correct.
Mr. Collins?
Is this the same engineer that decided how deep the well should go?
Different engineer.
I think I'll become an engineer.
That's your retirement job, right? There you go. Does anybody else have any questions? This one in particular? Right. And you have sent a letter to the engineering company, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve this? Because we do need to replace these because we need to stay in compliance.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we authorize the Service Authority Board of Directors designee to execute a change order in the amount of $28,547.05 to EO 5379.
Do I have a second? Motion properly seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Robotham?
Aye.
Mr. Collins?
Aye.
Mr. Sullins?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Mr. Young, before you leave, could you mention you got to attend the regional kickoff meeting with DEQ for the regional water supply plan, which is a state law that we have to have a requirement. Could you give a little background information to the board?
Yes, so the regional plan, we are teamed up with Caroline County, and that was more or less assigned to us based on some historical information and possible shared draw straw. Today's kickoff meeting more or less went over how the program's set up and possible avenues for funding and how to get to, or when the plan will be completed by, and the requirements of each side.
And then Mr. Stewart needs to hear this one, but he probably already knows about this. The state didn't give us a lot of money for these water plans, correct? It's a very small amount of money.
That is correct. Ultimately, it's divvied up between all of the different sub-regions, and I believe it was under $9,000 for the plan, and that's for each region.
And they could be a little expensive, so that's something that, this is another unfunded mandate. Putting it bluntly, it is important. It is important, but it is another unfunded mandate because I've heard some quotes of some bigger regions of how much those plans cost, and they can be a little costly. Hopefully, because it's just 2 counties, but with 2 counties, you have, and a town of Bowling Green, you have to share the costs as opposed to 5 or 6 localities. So I just wanted to give an update about that. Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you.
I do want to bring up Mr. Conlon and Mr. Young have started to keep track of all the projects we're doing and give a little update so that we have all our documentation and we don't lose track of it like in the past that things got lost and misplaced and no follow through. Because as Mr. Wasabi can tell you, one of the biggest things he's found is the no follow through. And looking over many, many minutes, he probably could write a book on the service authority at this point. So that's one of the things to help with that follow through. A couple other things I wanted to bring up. I did mention the consent order. I kind of gave it like our love letter from DEQ on Valentine's Day for a Perkins order in Oakland Park. We did get the third version of the Oakland Park PER for the decommissioning. Unfortunately, it still had a lot of defects. Mr. Rasavi highlighted quite a few of them, and so we sent it back to the engineer so that we can get a better one, or we're going to have to find a different engineering service because there was a lot of them. Mr. Rasavi, can you give some highlights?
Well, I think the one item that was pointed out in there that was pretty obvious when it said that the hop yard would be discharging in the Potomac River. That would be quite a feat for that to be accomplished. And there were just a number of other things that a normal PER that would be prepared would provide more financial information, because a PER is generally used when you have to arrange financing and other items. It would also discuss more extensively than what was in that draft about the purple pipe that we discussed. There was not, in my view, sufficient information to allow you to make a decision based on that. And also it neglected to discuss the savings that would be generated from the closure of the two plants, the Oakland Park and the plant at Perkins Corner. So it just needs to be more thorough, which we identified in our response.
Oops, sorry, to get this plant offline, because you're running 3 plants as opposed to 5 is much more effective and cost savings for the customers of the service authority in the county. We also did meet, I had mentioned this in our last meeting with one of the on-call, well, I guess not on-call, but you have a relationship with Bowden as a subcontractor about looking at the Dahlgren wastewater plant. So any looking at the Dahlgren wastewater plant, number one, to meet the WQIF fund grant that made a nutrient limit of 3, which right now we can't meet. We are once again having to pay back some of those funds. So we asked somebody to come and look at the plant to evaluate what needs to be done to the plant and give us a cost estimate of a thorough report on that to, number one, get it in compliance, because right now it's a struggle to meet those nutrient limits because of, I think we have one of the lowest limits at that plant, at 3. And also things that have been identified that need to be repaired so that it can stay fully in compliance all the time and have no violations. And also to look at having any purple pipe for any industry in that area. There is a process with pre-treatment on our end, pre-treatment at the industry, and then pre-treatment again when we get it. And DEQ has made it very clear that without upgrades to this plant and correcting a lot of violation history, that we would not be able to be permitted to even bring purple pipe there. So this is an engineering firm to Bowman Engineering to come and give us an overview evaluation and how much it would cost to do a proposal. Some of the things, they have done quite a few things, and I'll send it out to the board of things that they already looked at just on an overview in the hour that they walked around. Mr. Wasabi, can you give a little more update on that?
Well, there was a number of items in the report that you're going to forward on to the board members. I think some of those items we've had a discussion that we've asked Mr. Young to send some information to the engineering firm regarding what improvements are being made through the various DEQ ARPA fund grants, and that perhaps we need to sit down and have a roundtable with all the appropriate people with their expertise to determine factually what needs to be done, because there's a lot of things at that plant that have been done that's kind of piecemeal, and it doesn't really meet the statutory requirements that's necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Sarver. I just received it today, so I'll be sending it out to everyone. And then also, I don't know which meeting you would like, but having that engineering firm come and give a presentation either March 4th or March 18th meeting. Go ahead, Mr. Collins.
So this engineering firm is different than the other two?
Correct. And as Mr. Rasavi can tell, I called it as when the gentleman walked around with us, he definitely knows his stuff, and he kind of geeked out on, and he looked at our plan and right away came up with a lot of solutions, to correct things. So
Yeah, I don't have too much faith in engineers right now.
does anybody else have any questions on that matter? And then lastly, the easements, I think, correct, Mr. Young, we have one left, or two left, two easements left. They're a little bit of a challenge, and one of them might take some legal work. So there are two easements. They're on the portion from the courthouse to Hop Yard connection. They're two challenging easements that are left. Go ahead, Mr. Collins.
When will that be completed?
Mr. Young, can you come up and give, because one of them we will be meeting with tomorrow depending on the weather.
So one of them, and the other one, Mr. Young, I was just trying to get a general idea. I didn't.
Yeah. Mr. Young can give a little bit, because he has been working with the firms we contracted to help get these easements.
That is correct, and I would like to clarify on the interconnect project for the Hop Yard to courthouse. There are two on that line. There's one that has to do with the pump stations, and those are currently, or of those three, so far we have good cooperation from two of them. One of them is a little bit less cooperative, and we are in the process of meeting and working with them, trying to work out any details we can, come to any kind of solution we can to avoid legal steps forward.
When can we anticipate this be completed?
My goal is to have all of the ones to do with line work completed within the next 2 weeks, pending, or that is if we don't have to go a legal route.
Does anybody else have any other questions on that? Mr. Collins? Nope. All right. Thank you, Mr. Young. Well, that concludes the Service Authority part, except for secondary public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. Please provide your full name and district when submitting your public comments so that it can be properly recorded and included in the public record. Would anybody like to come up and speak? Is there anybody online? Has anybody received correspondence? With that being said, do I have a motion for adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn the Board of Directors to Tuesday, March 4th, 2025, 5:30 p.m. the boardroom of the Rivercombe Building.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion properly seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. The Board of Directors meeting has been adjourned. Mr. Chair?
Thank you. Next up, presentation 02-11, Department of Social Services 2024 Annual Report. Mr. Jonathan Franklin, Director, Department of Social Services. Hello, Mr. Franklin. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'll start off letting you know I'm not here asking for anything. If anything, I'm hoping to give you information and things that can help guide some future decisions for not only the county, but specifically our department. I thank you for giving me a few moments of your time this evening to share with you and the citizens of King George a handful of takeaways from our department's work throughout 2024. First, a few thank yous are in order. I thank each of you for your support and your engagement over the last year. But also like to publicly thank and commend my staff for their tireless efforts that demonstrate our ability to not simply meet federal and state performance measures, but often surpass those standards. Finally, I thank every citizen and organization who has come alongside us in serving our community by offering their time, money, and resources. So thank you, board members. Thank you, staff. They're the ones who do all the real work. And thank you, King George County citizens. Brevity is not always my strong suit. I can go on and on about the many things that go on in our office, but out of respect for your time and the agenda, I'm going to allow the annual report, which is in your board packet and up on the screen, to speak for itself, but I just want to draw your attention to a few highlights and takeaways. In administration, we are looking to the future. Being fully staffed for several consecutive months, nearly a year fully staffed, our workforce focus has shifted from recruitment to retention of staff. We have spent 3 years recruiting and filling vacancies, and now we want to keep them. We're also taking several steps to modernize many of our processes, which are ancient and archaic and use old databases, which will enhance our customer service and streamline our data reporting and our analysis, hopefully to inform you and my board better. In family services, which that encompasses child protective services, adult protective services, foster care, adoption, and anything that serves kids and families and vulnerable adults. We have encountered increased call volumes while also voluntarily engaging a new caseload of family support cases aimed at preventing children from entering foster care. We don't get credit by the state for that work, by the way. Despite seeing an increased trend of children entering foster care, adopting a new workflow in child protective services due to new legislation, and continuing to address the challenges of finding placements for older foster youth, our staff have been found throughout the year to exceed performance standards and in many cases outperform our competitors, large and small, around the state. We've been recognized by the Virginia Department of Social Services on multiple occasions for just exceeding the standards. And benefit programs, so that's all of our SNAP, Medicaid, TANF, and energy assistance. We continue to see steady annual increases in our caseloads. The average caseload increase for SNAP, Medicaid, energy assistance, and child care is 35% over the last 5 years. Nevertheless, our benefits team consistently meets their target measures for applications processed on time. Most significant of all, in 2024, the benefits team tackled Medicaid unwinding. You may have seen that in the newspaper. This is the 14-month process of Medicaid backlogs, which were the result of the 3-year federal public health emergency. So when they put a pause, when COVID hit on denying Medicaid applications, everyone was approved and they remained on the books for 3 years. So we had to go through every single person who had applied for Medicaid over that period and find them eligible or ineligible. As of July 2024, our team of only 2 Medicaid benefit specialists were finally back to business as usual. We completed it. Lastly, we have a vision for growth in the future, growing our staff, not just in number of employees, although I need more, but more so in assisting staff to find a margin in caseloads, to adopt new processes, to foster new skills, and to continue to challenge staff to outperform. Our workforce growth is unfortunately met with caseload growth. I've already mentioned some. Call volume, caseload increases, legislative changes, and the heightened complexity of cases and policies are inevitable hurdles. Each of these challenges are amplified by the limited space in our current facility. So I thank you, Mr. Collins, for highlighting our facility and talking about the rent that we pay. And it's not a publicly owned building. We rent it every month and we pay that bill. And it's not sufficient, which adds a burr into my saddle. We're not only paying rent, but it doesn't get the job done. It is a daily reminder for us to make do as we negotiate convening meetings, trainings, and providing family visitation for children in foster care with a single, small, multi-purpose room. Nevertheless, we are encouraged by our growing partnerships, including the Exodus Family Institute, who identified King George as the community for which they seek to develop new housing opportunities. In addition, we continue to offer an invitation for churches. Every church in King George and outside to join us in using the care portal. And there's specific information in the board packet that tells you more about it. This enables us to match families in need with churches, specific churches, who can provide not only tangible resources, but hopefully develop those connections into meaningful relationships to build community using the church. As our department looks to update our strategic plan in the fall of 2025, we do so with a renewed vision for our workforce, citizens, and community partners. We are a team you want to join, so come work for us. We are a help in your time of need, no matter what. And we are your partner in the mission to promote well-being, strengthen families and communities, protect the vulnerable, and help people sustain independence. We make every effort to remain true to our department motto that we are a small town here in King George with a big heart. So I thank you for your time. I hope that was brief enough, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, not really a question, but a wonderment. So 1 in 4 of King George residents are receiving benefits programs, SNAP, TANS, Medicaid. How do we get that lowered?
I'm not sure I necessarily have an answer for that. I mean, so our primary responsibility is to receive applications and to follow the federal and or state guidelines that determine one's eligibility, often based off of income and household size. My guess is that in months and years to come, that those standards are most likely going to shift some. You know, just what I've read in the news over the last month or so. But I mean, that's ultimately a congressional decision that determines one's eligibility. One attempt.
So the per capita income in King George is pretty crazy.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
But yet 1 in 4 are receiving benefits. That's a statement, not a question. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Franklin.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Good to see you.
Next up, 02-12, FYE 23-24, King George County Audit. Mr. Is it Grossnickel?
Andrew Grossnickel.
Grossnickel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can go ahead and hop to about the third slide. There you go. Thank you for your time this evening. Going to go over the results of the audit for the county for the year ended June 30th, 2024, and go over a couple of financial highlights as well from the year ended June 30th, 2024. Our audit was subject to the standards generally accepted in the United States of America for audits. Also, the specifications of audits of counties, cities, and towns, which is set forth by the Auditor of Public Accounts of Virginia. The standards of financial audits contained in the government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. And then finally, the county audit went under the provisions of the Uniform Guidance Act as well. The main byproduct, again, as I mentioned with the Service Authority, is our independent auditors' reports that are included in the annual comprehensive financial report for the county. For the county, we had 3 of those types of reports. So we had the 2 reports that we have in the Service Authority, the independent auditors report, and the Yellow Book or Government Auditing Standards report, but we also have what's called the Uniform Guidance report. The independent auditors report, again, is on the numbers in the financial statements, and we issued an unmodified or a clean opinion on the financial statements on the independent auditors report. The second report, again, is the internal control over financial reporting and on compliance. And in this report, we note any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal controls. We did have one material weakness reported, which related to the need for us to provide auditor recommended material auditor adjustments to the financial statements to get those financial statements in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. That finding and management response is located in the very back of the bound ACFR or the PDF version, the last page of that report. Then finally, that last report is also a compliance type report. That's the uniform guidance report, or you'll hear it referred to as a single audit report. Any county, city, town, authority, board, commission, nonprofits that expend over $750,000 in federal grant monies in a given year are required to undergo what's called a single audit or uniform guidance audit, where we select major programs based on the criteria that's set forth by the promulgating bodies, and then we audit the major programs for the standards as set forth by the ultimate grantor agency. In this report, we would note any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies related to the controls and compliance over those major federal programs that we tested. We did not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies on those major programs. We do have 2 communication letters that we issue in conjunction with the annual comprehensive financial report. One is the communication with those charged with governance. That report is one where it's a standard communication we provide at the end of any audit engagement, goes through things such as significant estimates that are used in the annual comprehensive financial statements. It indicates that management has made all the representations that are required of them to make and sign the representation letter. Says we didn't have any disagreements with management, things of that nature. And so that's a standard letter that we issue at the end of the engagement. We also at times issue what's called a management letter, which has comments and recommendations for improvements in internal controls that do not rise to the level of a material weakness or significant deficiency, but are things to bring to the attention of management for improvements in internal controls. And we did issue a management letter with several recommendations for improvements in internal controls. A couple of financial highlights that I want to go over. So the service authority, we mentioned that the residual the residual equity is referred to as net position. In a county report, you have 2 different bases of accounting. So you have that same basis, the full accrual basis, where all of your long-term obligations and all of your capital assets are included in the residual referred to as net position. And under that basis, the governmental activities of the county had a total net position of $91.6 million, June 30th, 2024. That represented an increase of about $3.1 million from June 30th, 2023. Then the second basis, which is the basis for governmental funds, for your general fund, your capital projects fund, et cetera, that you build a budget based on, that most of your day-to-day decisions are based on, is what's called a modified accrual basis of accounting. And under that basis, the long-term obligations are not included, long-term assets are not included, and the residual equity or retained earnings is referred to as fund balance. And so under that basis, the fund balances of your governmental funds at June 30th, 2024 was $103 million approximately. And that was an increase in the fund balances of the governmental funds for the year ended June 30th, 2024 of about $1.8 million. The different fund, within fund balance, there are different buckets of fund balance based on the level of restriction. And in a moment, we'll see a graph that illustrates this. You could have non-spendable fund balance, restricted fund balance, committed, assigned, and unassigned fund balance. Unassigned fund balance is that the county can use on, at their discretion. Non-spendable, for example, is a prepaid asset where that asset that becomes part of fund balance has already been spent, so you don't have discretion to spend that, for example. So the metric that a lot of governments look at as a key metric is that unassigned fund balance. For June 30th, 2024, that was $43.6 million. The other thing I will point out that you can refer to at your leisure is Exhibit 9, which goes through a higher level budgetary comparison for the general fund for June 30th, 2024. And that shows the original budget, the final budget, and the actual for your major revenue types, and then for your expenditures by department. And under that basis, you can see that the general fund revenues were under budget by about $2.4 million, primarily because some of those grants are budgeted, all up front, but money doesn't come in until a future date. It's not all necessarily in 1 year. But then general fund expenditures were held under budget by $5 million. So the expenditures were held under budget by more than where the revenues came under budget. A few charts and graphs just to go over again with a little historical perspective. Here's the last 5 years of the general fund, the primary operating fund of the county, and the fund balance buckets that I referred to previously. So you can see the general fund trending from 31.3 million to 50.4 million over the last 5 years, with the unassigned fund balance being that $43.6 million. And you can see the other buckets there that are included in that fund balance. And this is just a visual representation of those buckets of fund balance over the last 5 years. Next, we have a little line chart that goes and shows the governmental fund revenues by major categories, so property taxes, other local taxes, which are things like meals taxes, business licenses, things of that nature, intergovernmental, which includes both state and federal grant monies, charges for services, permits, use of money and property, fines and forfeitures, and miscellaneous. And you can see the trend analysis over the last 5 years. Most of those categories have remained relatively flat. You can see property taxes has gone up over the last, especially the last 3 years there in that line chart. I have a little pie chart here that breaks down the total governmental fund revenues, just so again you can kind of see on a visual basis how that pie is broken down. This is for your governmental funds, so it excludes the water and sewer enterprise funds, and you can see that about half of that total bucket of governmental fund revenues is made up of property taxes, with your other local taxes, things like meals tax, business license, etc., making up the second largest piece of that pie, and then state and federal governmental revenues, intergovernmental revenues being the third slice of that pie in size. The next line chart we have is governmental fund expenditures, and most of the variations that are outsized on this line chart are going to have to do with capital projects, because again, this includes both capital and general fund. And so, for example, there's a new courthouse that's under construction that, leads the judicial administration line to go up in 2023 and 4. And then here is a pie chart that goes through and shows you the breakdown visually of these, what we call major functions of expenditures for the governmental funds. And you can see that the three largest for 2024 are education, which that includes your contribution to, the school board, your annual budgetary contribution to the school board for their operations, and then public safety and judicial administration. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions on the audit and the financial statements for June 30th, 2024.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Grosnick, I have several questions that I'd like to ask about in regarding to the audit and other information you presented. The recording of expenditures item you identified in your management letter. Do you know why this action was done and who made the decision to complete the entry in this manner? Was this type of erroneous entry only done in the fire department account? One of the other items identified in your management letter was a reimbursement mislabeled travel training expense for the Department of Emergency Services that was not authorized under the county policy. Do you consider this to be an improper expenditure of public funds? And lastly, I responded to your form requesting some information on any improprieties that we had a knowledge of, and I met with you to discuss them. Is it possible for us to meet again so I may provide you with some information regarding some issues that still cause me a great deal of concern? Once you review this information, Could you report back to this board on the merits of further investigation of the items presented and any actions necessary on our part?
Yeah, thank you for those questions. So in regards to the first item, the recording expenditures, staff will be able to provide you with the source of the authorization of those journal entries or the methodology, approval of the methodology. I do not have that information available to me this evening. In regards to whether that was the only line, that was the only line, revenue line in our sampling that we noted had expenditures posted directly against the revenues. Obviously, we don't do an examination of every single line and every single item of detail for the county during our financial statement audit process. During our samples, this line came up as a line that we would look do some extra procedures on. And when looking at the detail of this line, I noted that there were several expense items that were posted as decreases to the revenue line. And ideally, you want to have the revenues and expenditures both reported in gross fashion. In regard to, I believe your second question, with regard to the travel item, I hesitate to make a legal type opinion on that item. What I will say is it was not in accordance with the policy. I will also say that it's not a customary expenditure that I see. You know, in my tenure of auditing local governments, I haven't really seen that type of an expenditure reimbursed under a travel line. So that's what I will offer on that item. And then finally, yes, I would be happy to meet with you and go over any additional concerns and provide any guidance that I can to the board as to whether they should look into any other matters moving forward.
So, do you have anything? Ms. Stroud?
Sir, overall, would you say that over this past year, the county has managed its funds in a responsible way?
That's a very subjective question from an overall standpoint, big picture standpoint. While there's always areas for improvement in any government, business, et cetera, the key metrics of things like fund balance went up, net position went up. Your overall budgetary variances were the favorable outweigh the unfavorable. From a control standpoint, there's obviously areas of improvement, and the one area that we noted as a material weakness was noted as a material weakness last year. I know that the county took some steps to try to improve in that area, and improvements were made, but not to the extent that would allow us to eliminate that finding as a material weakness. So again, there were steps on that non-quantitative piece where finance staff met with me and worked on trying to take ownership of more of the adjustments that we've identified. And there were improvements in that area, but we still had that material weakness. And that's something ideally from a financial statement finding situation, you want to try to avoid those when you can.
So, all that being said, after the meetings you've had now, do you believe those controls are in place?
I think that continued efforts on staff's parts will be needed in order to feel confident that that material weakness will be eliminated in the FY25 audit process. Additional training, things of that nature, much like we went through in this past audit cycle. But as you can see, if you look at the document, there are 200 and some pages in this financial report, and there are a lot of complex accounting pronouncements. Like GASB is now up to 101. And so, for example, there are things that were eliminated that were seen in the last audit as things that need to be adjusted. But in this year, something different, was something that needed to be adjusted for. And so there is additional training that would be helpful in order to try to minimize the chance that you have that same finding again.
So, Mr. Spalding, you know where I'm headed with this?
I think I do, and I just want to remind the board, so this is from July 1 of 23 to June 30 of 24. Previous board, previous county administrator, a lot of turnover, I think for the good for staff. So this audit, encompasses a lot of the changes that have been made here at the county over the last, year and a half. So I think we are trending in the right direction. I appreciate the report here. And I've got full confidence in my staff to continue working so some of these deficiencies can come off of next year's audit. But I just want to remind the board of this time frame and the changes that we have made and kind of the representation of this audit along with the staff who was here at that time.
And to that point, staff has a strong desire, to eliminate these issues, and spent a full day with me going through one-on-one training on trying to transfer some of my knowledge on some of these items that we're having to adjust over to them. And so it's certainly something that I know staff has been working on. Unfortunately, it just didn't, and the improvements were made, just not to the extent that we were able to alleviate that comment.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm lacking the warm and fuzzy that I was looking for in that. So, I mean, I'm confident our staff is working to improve. I'm hoping that, they've got a resource they can come back to continue that improvement, or before our next audit. So.
Yeah, and I'm available for additional training and things of that nature to try to do everything I can to help them. Again, it's a matter of imparting some of the things that we have in our tool belt for identifying adjustments into county staff. To your point, you don't want to see a material weakness, and ideally you don't want to see the same one 2 years in a row. And so from that standpoint, it's not a positive thing that was presented here, and hopefully that will be alleviated in fiscal year 25.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, can you bring the pie chart up again? This is just for clarification to the public, which is usually it's education who takes up the pie chart, but public safety is now the biggest chunk of the pie chart.
Again, part of that is related to this being governmental funds in total, so that includes capital. So it'll fluctuate a little bit. Just for an idea, from your general operating funds, it's still I believe would skew heavy into education as the primary bucket. So. Well, public safety would not be far behind. Out of $73 million of general fund expenditures, $23 million was education, and second behind that was $19 million, and those were by far the largest buckets for just the general fund.
I just wanted to clarify for the public, because if sometimes you just read those charts, you just see, and so by clarifying it, those that are watching can understand it a little better. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Let me say this when I'll let you go. So just some clarification for people at home, like a lot of people aren't going to know what material weakness is and items that need adjustment. And I wonder if there's any items that need adjustment that just stand out to you off the top of your head. There's some of the biggest red flags that you can just speak to those things and tell us exactly what they are.
Yeah, so when we speak with material weakness or materiality, it's talking about both a qualitative and quantitative, so both a actual number-based approach and also a qualitative approach. that's non-number based as to what is a significant number impacting the financial statement. And so when we say we had material adjustments, it means large, both in nature of a dollar amount and in sensitivity of type of area of the financial statements that those are hitting. And so, for example, for those audit adjustments, some of the areas that needed to be adjusted were long-term obligations due from other governmental units, accrued liabilities and revenues, and those are listed in the last page in that finding, and those are some of the areas that had material adjustments. So significant adjustments that if we had not adjusted those, the reader may not get an adequate picture of the county's financial condition, if that's helpful.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Mr. Collins.
Yes, sir. Just one final thing. So last year's audit was with a different director and a different county administrators, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this year it's a new director and a new county administrator. And the reason I bring that up is because even though there's questions that we ask, the disaster that was before had to go a long, steep curve to come to where we're at today. So there might be some work that needs to be done, but they've been doing so much work to get fixed that sometimes we harp on the weaknesses, but we don't harp on the positives. So I'd just like to tell the financial folks that you're doing a great job. You all were here, well, Ms. Cobb, the new director, was here in the last board, and she's here in the new board. And I think that things have gone really well, and I'm proud of Ms. Cobb, what she's done with her department. Thank you.
And Ms. Cobb was only here for part of this fiscal year that is undergoing this audit, and then the first time going through the audit process at final in that role.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else have any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Next up, 02-13, draft capital improvements plan, FY 26 to 30. Matthew Smolnick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So before you tonight is your first look at the FY 26 to 30 CIP. So we started this back in October 24, where we solicited CIP requests from county departments, outside agencies, constitutional officers. Our budget team met individually with each individual who requested an item on the CIP. They went through their explanations. I brought this to the Planning Commission on January 14th of 2025 as an informational item, and a public hearing was held at the Planning Commission. It was February 13th. It was postponed due to snow, so we had it on Thursday night. Changed things up a little bit at the Planning Commission. Instead of having all the department heads present to the Planning Commission, what I understood took hours upon hours, I made the presentation on behalf of my departments and the agencies. We gave the Planning Commission a little bit of homework following the initial meeting. They sent back their rankings, which are on the screen and under PC priority, 1 to 2 being the most important, and then down to 9, 10, the least important in their eyes. The staff priority with the words urgent, necessary, and so forth in that column D, these are the requests that the recipients had, the individuals making the request. So what I've done is I've provided you all with the Planning Commission priorities. And based on the Planning Commission, they did, after I got their numerical rankings, they did switch a few things around. They added a few items to their list with a higher priority. And I just want to go through a few of them to let you know what the Planning Commission, I believe I sent this to you the night of the Planning Commission. So with the top priorities for the Planning Commission, Under schools, project number 3, the school board office replaced the fire alarm. And I'm really just focusing on fiscal year 25-26 at $125,000. Next item the Planning Commission recommended was the King George Middle School catwalk, $87,160. They don't have a lift that is high enough to access some of the equipment in the middle school. So catwalks to ensure the safety of the school employees. That was that, and you all received, and the public received the entire request in this packet with a lot of detailed explanations from each of the requesters. The next item that was actually moved up at the Planning Commission meeting was the King George High School turf replacement. The schools showed this initially in years 27, 28. The Planning Commission saw this as a higher priority as we were, I believe, we were the first school in our district with turf, and it is at the end of its life cycle. If you ever walked across that or had a son or daughter play on it, the turf is coming up. It's at the end of its life. So the Planning Commission saw that as a priority, so they wanted to move that up on the list for consideration. Skipping down to fire rescue emergency services, the ambulance replacement program, $400,000 in next year. There are 7 ambulances in total that the county has, and this is a replacement cycle, so we don't have to replace 3 or 4 of them in 1 year. It's a rotational cycle, so $400,000 is being requested in 25-26 for a replacement ambulance. Moving down, general property, the sheriff's office. The 2 items that the Planning Commission highlighted were fleet vehicle purchase, $520,000. Now, it should be noted that these vehicles, $65,000 apiece, 2 of them are tied directly to 2 new position requests that requested by the sheriff. If those 2 positions do not get approved with the operating budget, the vehicles would not be needed. So if the $520,000, if those 2 positions are not approved, that could be reduced by $130,000. The other item that the Planning Commission felt strongly about was the E91 Communication Center console replacement. This is a refurbish of the Communication Center. There are pictures included in your packet. Cramped quarters, the supervisor is not able to be in the same room, so they felt this was a needed request by Sheriff Giles for his communication center. Moving down, another item that the Planning Commission moved up following their initial rankings for Parks and Recreation was project number 12, multimodal pathways, trailways implementation. This is a placeholder for matching funds. So I'd say probably about 4 or 5 months ago, there was a grant that we received. There were matching funds approved by this board for sidewalks at the Sheets intersection going up into the middle school. This is an example of why the Planning Commission felt that it was important to have this money in the CIP. As grants become available, we have matching funds in the event that we are successful with one of our grant applications. The last 2 items that the Planning Commission deemed critical or necessary to include in the FY 25-26 CIP are both of the information technology. These are computer replacement, $72,500. Now computers, the warranties for 5 years with all our laptops and desktops, they are also on a cycle to replace. So once they hit the end of their life cycle, IT is responsible for replacing all the computers here at the county. And then also 2 server replacements, $105,000. So with those requests, I'm going to include the full gamut of the vehicle request for the Sheriff's Office. The priorities for the Planning Commission total $2,626,086. $2,626,086. So last year, if I can recall, we had a capital improvement plan of right around the $3 million mark. So I went ahead and looking at this, I said, well, what else, could we consider? And, look, as I sat down through all of the requests for all the different agencies, I've identified a few things I wanted to bring to your attention and for your consideration. Now, the Board of Supervisors, we will hold a public hearing on this. I request we do that in the near future so we can have this behind us so we can focus on the operating budget. some of the items that I kind of flagged and I want you to look at and consider under general properties, the second project, the Rule 4 YQ locks. This was, we are all very familiar with the discussions held at the new courthouse, whether who's going to pay for them, were they on the plans, were they not on the plans, were they discussed? This item is $300,000 request to install the YQ locks, which are the badge readers at the new courthouse. So that is one that be recommended, from me as the county administrator. Another item, speaking with the register, there's new requirements coming online for voting systems to comply with ADA. And there was in the packet, I'm going to pull this up. And I'm not able to, I don't know where it went, but speaking with Ms. Gump, the registrar, it was for 15 new voting machines along with 8 touch writers to be in compliance with ADA standards. These are new standards that are coming down the line. Ms. Gump wants to remain ahead of the curve, doesn't want to be forced into a last minute decision. We have a vendor that we use that we can acquire the new voting machines for just a little under $87,000. So that is another recommendation that I have. If we put both of those, the YQ locks and the voting machines, we're $3,012,782. So that puts us right in line with where we were last year. That could be decreased by $130,000 if the 2 new positions are not approved by the sheriff. But I wanted to at least put this in front of your eyes. See if we can field any questions by the Board of Supervisors. I've got some of my staff here at the planning committee, at the public hearing. If you have specific questions and would like my staff here, I will have them to answer any detailed questions that you may have. I open the floor for discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I know Ms. Bender has a question.
Yes, and I bring this up because a big complaint we get from the citizens is abandoned buildings. So very shortly, we will have an abandoned building right in the parking lot. So there's nothing on here about any kind of.
I believe that was last year's CIP. I'm looking at, it was in last year's CIP.
Is that a feasibility? So, like what exactly? I mean, I know there was one done under the previous county administrator. I wasn't exactly happy with it.
Let me look to see if I can pull that up, and I can get back to you hopefully by the close of the meeting. But I believe that was included last year's CIP that you all approved in August or September.
So I'd like to just discuss what we're going to do, because I've said we can't leave abandoned buildings anymore. We need to make a decision on what we're going to do with them and a path forward. And then looking at this, I want to bring up 2 things. I know they had said to replace the fire alarm at the school board office. I see a lot of things with the school board office, and we need to have a hard conversation of what we're going to do with it, because I don't like throwing money in a building that we possibly could get rid of. Do you know what I mean? Or
yes, ma'am. That was a very similar conversation we had at the planning commission meeting.
And then my last one, Mr. Chair, is I always put it out. We have a nice park at Siddell Brooks Park, and there's no bathrooms. And I do hear quite a bit, especially from seniors, because they go there to walk, that there's no bathrooms. So one thing I would like to put out to be reconsidered is possibly the bathrooms at Siddell Brooks Park.
Mr. Collins, do you have any questions?
I do, but I'll wait for y'all.
Ms. Owens?
Mr. Smolnik, the locks in the courthouse, the locks in the courthouse, I thought we were trying to pursue getting the builder to put those in. Is that?
So that was the discussion we had here at the Board of Supervisors. Mr. Stewart and I, we had a long list of change orders, $150,000 plus or minus. We negotiated that down, brought it back to the Board of Supervisors for consideration. The locks were pulled off of that change order, so none of the change orders were approved by the board, and that was not part of the request. It was initially made by the builders and by the architects. They contend that it is not in the plans. We're not putting them in if they're not in the plans.
So are we saying that's done? We have to pay for it?
Yes. Yes.
Just want to make sure that was still, that's the direction we're going in. Okay.
Mr. Stroud?
Yeah, I'm not happy about that and some things, but there's little we can do about it. I mean, people fail to do their jobs, so we're stuck with the bill on that. But I really don't have anything to add at this point. Thank you.
Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Ms. Bender, when you were speaking about the feasibility study that was done, it was presented to us. The price tag for the renovations for the courthouse was $20 million, which was ridiculous for what is going to happen over there. That number can be cut by 3/4 reasonably to take care of what things that need to be done and restructure that building. As far as the CIP, the $1,500,000 for the school board facility storage, and then you have the sheriff's office at $800,000 for a storage facility, and we're storing our stuff at Ralph Bunch, and we're also paying for several storage lockers that we're storing stuff in. So again, we're back to the maintaining and trying to get these things corrected from historical. But $1,500,000 is a lot of money for a storage facility for a school board office or school board. You would only have to have part of it conditioned for their paper, but the rest of it would just be the junk that they store. The VOTEC feasibility study was listed as a number 3. I don't think you even need a study for that building. You just need know what needs to be done. There was I don't know how you all feel about the weapon detection system, but that's almost $1 million. That was for 26, 27 in there. The folding doors at the library of $80,000. I understand they were installed upside down originally, but I think we could take that off the list for now. The sheriff's office, even though it's a priority 4 for the metal building, I spoke with Mr. Smolnick, and the reasons why I'm interested in completing that project is because they have all this equipment, their crime scene van, their command post, their other very expensive equipment that's outside in the elements, and the elements tear up those vehicles, and they're like some are $1 million to replace. So we should protect the investment over there. So I would be okay with that number 4 moving up. Parks and Rec, I would scratch the dog park. I would question the old animal pound, $65,000 to remove a building that's, I don't know, 20 by 20. Seemed like a lot of money. I thought they were using that for storage. It didn't cost us anything. I don't know why I would tear it down or why it would cost so much. And I would take off the Citizen Center renovations is $95,000. I would hold off on that. And I'd actually hold off on the restrooms at the park. I think there's more pressing issues we need to take care of before that. And that's all I'll comment for now.
Any other comments? Yes, Ms. Bender.
I had thought about this, and those that know there are basketball programs in the county it could help with some more facilities that kids could come to practice over the summer is maybe Mr. Clark consider next year adding in maybe, if it's a possibility, of some outdoor basketball courts at Sealston or Siddell Brooks to help encourage and give an opportunity to our students to be able to play outdoors. Because there's no limited facility. So that, you know, I may hear many tales in the old days of the people that used to go and do pickup basketball games, and maybe that could help our record of our programs at the high school and the middle school by having some more outdoor facilities. That's just a dream of mine. I'm just throwing it out there.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So the middle school overlay of the roof. So the history on that, Mr. Smolnick, is that roof has been it's been replaced 3 times. It's been overlaid twice. What I mean by that, they built a metal roof on top of the roof. So if you go up there, you can see there's roof built on roof on roof, and then they did. And they were talking millions of dollars. We're not talking. We're talking, you know, $5 million, $3 million to do these projects. When the middle school addition was built, I wanted a roof that was slanted, so we wouldn't have these problems of these flat roofs. But the middle school roof, I see where they have the overlay. All that roof, including the old section, was already overlaid. I don't know why that would even be on there. So could you ask the schools why that's on there? Because all those roofs are new.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Smolnick.
Mr. Chairman, thoughts from the board on public hearing for the CIP. Would you like to consider this for, you know, maybe wait a little while, hold it in 4 weeks from now? Are we ready to move forward? I've noted, and I'll go back and watch some of your concerns, bring you back a plan in 2 weeks. No, I'm sorry, it'd have to be 4 weeks because of the public hearing notice. So the soonest we could do it is 4 weeks from tonight, or we could go 6 weeks. Is there a specific direction from the board?
4 or 6. Say 4. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's move on. Next up, Year 2-14, Excess Project, Miss Mary Parnell. 3 times you get this, isn't that great?
Yes, 3 times.
We've heard about everything, right? And
Yes.
so and not to kind of rehash everything back up, I think there were some specific questions. So let's just, if we get into questions of the board, maybe that'll direct everything. And then if there's something you need to add, then we can go that route. How's that sound?
Sure, happy to
All
do
right.
that.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Parnell? No questions? I thought you had a couple. You're eating.
Thank you. The one that I asked before was, are there means to make sure that the homes are not snapped up by a wealthy person that's going to turn them into rental properties? Are there ways of making sure that when the families that move up and out, they sell them at a reasonable rate? Obviously, you know, a little bit of profit, but I don't want them getting rich off of this. And then, or turning it into a rental property themselves that's not taken care of, and within 5 to 10 years, it's run down and nasty.
Yes, we presented several models at our last meeting of how other housing organizations have addressed that to eliminate the possibility that those things will happen. And of course, as a nonprofit, and also in that arena, we would have those same concerns and take those steps as other organizations have, which are a varied type of models, either deed restrictions or subsidy recapture. Those kind of different things is how you stipulate that to prevent anyone from, you know, having taking all of the benefit and not leaving anything for anyone else.
Does that include making sure we get the right customers there? And by that, I mean, we talk about targeting, county workforce folks. We talk about fire and rescue. We talk about, sheriff's office and teachers and whatnot. But I mean, can we legally limit it to those folks?
No, and I have looked into that since our first meeting. We can't legally limit the people. What we can do is say our program stresses that we are looking at teachers, first responders, healthcare workers as a program. We can target those folks, and that's exactly who we've been working with. We met with middle school teachers. We've had 3 community events right here, people, residents of King George, and so that's how we've been moving forward. And also we've been invited to present before the firefighters at their next staff meeting coming up.
Any other questions? Mr. Stroud?
So thank you for responding back and forth with me. We've been exchanging emails. So I made some time to do a little research into this, and there is a way we can limit who goes in there. But the way the way to do that to achieve the outcome, I think that maybe somebody would be looking for is the county would need to own those houses and make it available to county employees. And I don't know if we want to head down that path, but there is a way. The deed restriction, though, from my research, may not be the best path because the resale on the deed restrictions is capped and usually based on the area median income on the models. And if we use the area median income here, because this county's got a higher area income, that's probably not the best model. The best one that Ms. Parnell had talked about was using a community land trust. And that's where the land itself is placed under a 99-year renewable lease. And whenever people buy the house, they lease the land. And then whenever they get ready to resell the house, that whatever that income that is based out of that, they still have the ability to build equity in the house, but they don't own the actual land. So, but there are ways. I think in the end, on this, the concerns that were addressed earlier by Ms. Lobos and some people who don't come forward and necessarily talk here, but have the concerns, is that this doesn't fall into another bad neighborhood. And, somewhere I think that, it's tough. I mean, I did some reading on it, and it's just not an easy thing. We have people that say we don't have affordable housing, and you got people that, don't really want to bring affordable housing, because of the challenges we have with other costs that come with that. So, but I do appreciate your time. I mean, if there's, a way to answer any questions or stuff like that, I almost feel like I could answer them now, but thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Bender.
I have a quick question. For this, if we did do a letter, is it a motion or a consensus? Just to authorize the county administrator to send in a letter of support?
Madam Chair, you're looking for community block grant funds,
Yes.
is that correct?
Yes.
I think you all have to adopt a resolution, and then I think GWRC said they would work with you all to help with that request, is my recollection. But I think you all would have to adopt a resolution for that.
Do we? Yeah, I was just going to ask, do we have verbiage for that?
No, I wasn't asked to draft anything up for that. I apologize.
Could it be crafted if we came back to this part? Or can this be I know it's time sensitive, can it be at the next meeting?
Madam Chair, if you want to do it, you just approve it in concept and we'll have to work with them to determine what the proper language is. But
We're not approving the development.
No, it's a letter of support for their application for grant funding.
no, it's not.
Or help me with the verbiage.
You all are requesting community block grant funding to assist with this project is what I understand. And I think what typically these are done to refurbish neighborhoods that are having difficulties. That's the only place I've ever seen them used before, but that doesn't mean they couldn't be used to start new housing projects. But typically you have a place where a neighborhood where the houses are not in good shape or something, and you get the community block grant funding. The first step is to get the feasibility grant, which I think was $100,000, and then you can apply for more money. But I think you would need to have a resolution to support this. And then you'll have to go through the block grant funding process.
Thank you.
May I add a couple of things to what Mr. Boyle said? For the CDBG, what I understand is that you are able to have new construction, that it doesn't have to be a refurbishing of anything. And what I thought he presented was that we were going to proceed, take a look to see the feasibility of moving forward is what I've been understanding that he said to get your approval, and that he would work with you and us to look at this process and see if it's feasible and makes sense to move forward. Is what.
That's sort of what I understood. That's why I said a letter of support that, yeah, so if it has to be different, I mean, I understand because it could be a no. And you already have, the land, when you purchased it, it was already plotted for that. So it's already been zoned. So you could plop houses on it today. You're just trying to find the funds to pay for the infrastructure so you can put them out as affordable homes.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
Madam Chair,
to make it more attainable for the workforce to purchase them.
you would have to adopt a resolution in order to do a letter of support from the board, take a vote on it.
Right. That's what because we had it as an action. So, Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
so I think we're putting the cart before the horse. Because if you apply for the 100,000 and then they say it's feasible, then you'll apply for the $1 million for the infrastructure. But for both of these grants, I want the county to manage them with the county staff. And then after they get the $1 million grant, in that grant language, GWRC said basically, if you get the $1 million, then you got to build the houses. But there wasn't any end game of who's going to pay for that. And so it sounded like that we would be on the hook for that. So Mr. Stroud, you put no. If the GWRC guy came here and I asked him specifically, if you get the $1 million grant for infrastructure, do they have to build the houses? And he said yes. And I said, so who's going to pay for the houses? And the answer was not ever clear. GWRC's not. Mrs. Pinnell doesn't have the backing yet. So there's only one other choice. It'd be back on the county.
May I say something? We will definitely build the homes. This isn't our attempts to keep the roads and infrastructure that amount of the cost. If we have to add that to the homes, which we are building, then to eliminate that cost would make the housing more attainable for the workforce that we are looking to serve. So Exodus is going to be building the homes. I didn't hear that Mr. Boyle said that, and possibly he did. I did not hear him say that the county would be on the hook for building the homes. I mean, that's why we're here. The Exodus, we're gonna to construct the homes.
So, Mr. Chairman, so they can construct the homes now.
They can. I didn't, I didn't hear anywhere that the county's on the hook for that. The way that I understood it and what they're trying to do based on the research that I read is they're just trying to get the grant because they can go build the homes. They can have a developer, somebody come in and provide the money and build the homes and sell them. But that infrastructure cost to do the engineering, to put in the water, sewer, the roads, that the VDOT standards is expensive. So if they get grant money to do that engineering, then that is going to reduce money that would otherwise go to the home buyers. So that I think is what they're trying to do. But we're not saying yes or no, they can't do that. They can't build they can't build the houses there as long as that they permit. My understanding,
Correct.
there's nothing keeping them from building a home there right now. So, but if they are able to get this funding, then I think the development itself will probably be a better quality development. If they have that money to use for the engineering, it may save some work on our staff, trying to approve the plans and stuff like that. If they do a good job doing it up front, then it make our staff's job hopefully easier.
So
Mr. Chairman, I think the way this works is these grants come through the county. I don't think they would go directly to Mrs. Parnell's organization. They come to the county. The county sort of would then work in partnership with Mrs. Parnell's organization. And so to a certain extent, the county's going to have some managerial responsibility. Your staff would be involved in this. And maybe that's what Mr. Collins means by on the hook. You are going to have a level of responsibility if you do it, just so you understand.
Sounds.
Ms. Parnell?
Yes.
So I just want to confirm, you actually have the funding or at least commitment of funding to do this today?
We don't have a solid commitment to do it, but we have the wherewithal and all that we need. We have builders that we've been working with and other developers, and so we have the wherewithal to get it done. But no, we do not have a formal commit. We have not applied for a construction loan because this was we wanted to explore this process first.
Okay.
How many of these have you done before?
Exodus has not done any before, but as I said, we have partners that have been in this arena. Habitat for Humanity is one of our partners that we're working with, and other housing organizations. So we will be able to have a formal arrangement with them if it is necessary.
Any other questions? Are there any motions or no?
I would make a motion, I just don't know how to word it. So that's where I'm coming. Let me take a stab at. I will make a motion to request the county attorney and county administrator to work on a resolution to try and
Do you want to support Mrs. Parnell's attempt at getting community block grants for this project?
I'll say yes. I
think you can just adopt that as a motion if that's what you want.
That'll be my motion.
Second.
Motion properly second. Is there any further discussion?
Yes.
Collins?
I don't, so is this including the $1 million? It's only 100,000?
Right now, it's just the phase one, the first phase of it.
So can that be more of a clear motion? Doesn't mean that we're still going to stay, that a resolution will be for the next phase.
Is that possible, Mr. Stewart?
It is entirely up to you all. I would suggest that if Department of Housing and Development thinks you're only interested in the first part, they may not take it real seriously. So it's whatever you all want.
I think they kind of go hand in hand.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would be for the first one to see the feasibility, but I wouldn't be for the second one with the $1 million and all that goes with it. There's no end game to this, and the county's not in the housing business, like I've stated before. And I think that I do support your goal, and I want you to go ahead and build the houses. But I don't really want the county in the business of doing that.
Yes, I wouldn't want the county to be in that business either. We're really wanted to proceed the grant, the planning part, and the roads and infrastructure. The overall intent with that, the home buyer would have the ultimate benefit, and it would not be any additional burden on the county. And Exodus would do what housing organizations do.
Mr. Chairman, you want an amended motion that just says that you all would adopt a resolution supporting the feasibility grant for Mrs. Parnell's project through a community block grant of $100,000. If you just want to do that part now, that would be a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Need a roll call on this?
You withdrew your other motion, right?
Yeah, and I withdraw my other motion. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Do we know how it would go if we proceed with this?
Mr. Chairman,
Colin?
we're right in the middle of a vote.
Okay.
Could we go ahead and follow through with the action of the board?
Yes. Mr. Collins, how do you vote?
With 100,000, yes.
That was the motion. Mr. Sullins?
Aye.
Mr. Stroud?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Which passes.
Okay, so we'll proceed with the planning, and you'll work with GWRC, and we'll come back and talk about the other later.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you all for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, next up, application number Z-2024-00218, Clyde Limited Partnership and Harwood Power LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Supervisors. Cyrus Tashikori with Harwood Power. I'm joined by Eric Wood from Energy Safety Response Group, 20-year firefighter veteran and 6 years with a battery safety test lab, and Scott Foster with Gentry Lock. And I have good news. I only have 3 slides, so I'll make it as fast as I possibly can. Since the last hearing, I reached out to everyone who spoke with concerns about the project, including all of you, and thankfully talked to most of them. Really appreciate Perry Bowen's time in particular, gave me some homework, and would really like to especially thank Ryan McGill, if he's still here, for the great engagement and several of the updates and the conditions that we've either proposed to revise or new conditions came from conversations with them and in response to concerns that you all raised or requests that you all made. Including comments we heard tonight. So just to summarize, tonight we heard concerns from about nickel, cobalt, manganese, heavy metals, concerns about water runoff, concerns about firefighting resources and pay, and then concerns about the non-monetary need for this type of project. And I believe Jason Greenwood, who is not here anymore, said, this type of project really belongs on industrial land, and thankfully this is industrially zoned land. But I'm going to address each of those concerns with new and revised conditions that are in your packet. I'll start with that last one, the non-monetary need. So the next slide, I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but these are kind of to briefly put a fine point on, other than the money, the net money to the county, what else, why is this project necessary? So NSF Dahlgren says, this type of project is an example of grid improvements that we believe will ultimately benefit NSF Dahlgren as a power consumer. That's the same for every power consumer in the county. Battery energy storage especially has this benefit for power consumers. That's NSF Dahlgren. The trade press, I shared this last 2 times that I've been up here, but the consumers in this region will pay $14.7 billion more for capacity than they did the last auction. So there's a 7,000% increase in capacity. That's because demand is outstripping supply, and this type of project will help. Dominion Energy. Energy storage is critical to providing continued reliability for our customers. Continued reliability means money, and it means lives and livelihoods. So those are not the tax money going to the county, but ratepayer money, consumer money. And then finally, just a few weeks ago, the Virginia legislature has a commission that put out a report. An independent model of the energy grid commissioned by this commission found that a substantial amount of new power generation and transmission infrastructure will be needed in Virginia to meet even half of the unconstrained demand, even half. So that's kind of the big picture on the non-monetary benefits that this type of project presents. Next slide, please. So I'll quickly go over these. They're in your packet. These are new and revised. And just, I guess, taking a step back, a lot of these are prior set of conditions, really pair the risk with what we're proposing here. And we're trying to go above and beyond. And Supervisor Bender, I realize, you may be a no vote, but we're going to do everything we can to address your concerns either way. So these either directly address concerns or—
Mr. Cyrus?
Yes, sir.
Just real quick.
Yes,
So
sir.
we all got the packet, so we've seen
Sure.
it, okay? So I would just start off with just really, does the board have anything? Because we've read the changes that you made, and they've been, you've gone out of your way to answer those and make things better. So, and I just want to see if anyone on the board has any questions towards any of that, because we are in action tonight, so you don't have to do most of this again.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have one because I reached out. Thank you. I reached out to Chief Moody to ask him some questions concerning the fire rescue. Mr. McGill had sent them to me, and I reached out to him to ask. And I want to bring up again my concern about if there is a fire, I'm not saying there would be, but if there was a fire, the amount of, it could take all of our fire and rescue services. So we would have to use other responding departments. And I'm just really concerned about what does that do to our county if everybody's coming to your fire and there's somebody else's fire, and the cost to the county and the staff. And one of the other questions was about hazardous materials, and whether it was a good question by Mr. McGill about, do we have a hazardous materials response team, and would we have to get one? And the training for it. So I did want to ask you specifically about that, because a normal firefighter is not trained for something like this.
Sure. And I believe we have comments from Chief Moody on this application that, I would imagine address at least one, if not both of those comments. But if there's a fire, would it require all the firefighters in the county? Absolutely not. We've talked about the nature of the fire, this type of project versus like a building-based giant project, and how the firefighters do not engage the fire. They stand at a distance, put water on the adjacent enclosures. So if there were a fire, which we actually did a little bit of homework on, can you try to characterize the probability based on the last several years of any particular system, let alone a modern system under NFPA 855-2023 like this, catching on fire? And it's a 1/10 of 1% based on the existing projects of one of the biggest, we just looked at one big developer or one big equipment vendor. So what we're talking about is, at most probability weighted, an hour a year, but really it would be years with no fire. And maybe there's a fire 1 year in the next decade, and it takes 8 hours for 4 firefighters to stand there and like cool the adjacent enclosures. I mean, we could go 30 years without any fire. And in the meantime, there are fires all the time in the county elsewhere. But I don't know if that addresses your concern about and I'd be curious to see what Chief Moody said in response to that.
Not 100%, because as we know with our weather forecasting in the last week, models are only as good as the data that's inputted in, and especially with weather. What I'm getting at is you're talking about modeling, and you're talking about, the probability. Probability sometimes isn't accurate. It just takes one accident to happen or one event that causes a major problem. And you can't predict everything. But that's one concern I have. And the other one is on the stormwater in a 30,000 gallon tank. What happens if you use up that whole tank? That could happen. Where are you going to get the water from?
So the current condition requires a tank on site or direct connection to the county system. We can, and we talked about this last 2 weeks ago, where the different methods of in other jurisdictions where they don't have storage tanks on site. Daisy chain trucks connecting to the county system for emergency use only. Those are in the conditions. That would be something that we would agree with the county on, prior to the site plan approval, in terms of under what conditions can we refill the 30,000 gallon tank from the county system, which is right there, or some other arrangement where we would refill the county system. And if you want, I can ask Eric to comment on that directly.
Well, and also obviously, when you're putting it on the fire and to put out the fire, the water has to go somewhere. And I know you mentioned stormwater ponds, but what if there was a weather event? And I know this is a lot of what if, then there could be an overflow on the stormwater ponds. Like, is it going to be deep enough if there was?
Yeah, so we're in the first place, we're talking about a very, very unlikely event in terms of any firefighter water going into stormwater drainage that was directly on the fire. One of these conditions, the new conditions that you're referencing, allows the firefighters to turn off that drain. But the volume in those stormwater basins are much, much larger than the 30,000 gallons in the tank, just by virtue of stormwater regulations and the size of that project. So you're talking about an extremely unlikely event. And now the scenario is, what if it rained the day before and there's stormwater in there, it's not empty, and then there's a fire and this unlikely event happened on top of that, it's even less likely. It's theoretically possible. I think this condition itself is not necessary. It's not something that's common across the Commonwealth. We're putting it here to address what we think is a concern that's already addressed by kind of everything else we've talked about.
Why I bring it up is the citizens, they put us in office to protect them. Absolutely. And to ask these questions. And I do. And
yeah,
it only takes one time, as we've seen in a lot of events recently. So that still is a concern that hasn't been 100% answered for me. But I do appreciate you taking the time to try to address these needs and put it. And it's just, I have a problem with the project, not your presentation, or that you put in an effort to try to answer the question. So I do really appreciate you being upfront and calling. But you did ask me what Chief Moody responded to when I asked the question about the hazardous materials. And if you just give me a second, let me.
And I hadn't responded to that, but I'm happy to if you'd like.
King George County does not have a hazardous materials team. The regional hazmat team would come from Fredericksburg Fire Department as coordinated by the VAEOC as a state coordinated asset. If their team is not available, the next hazmat team would have to come from Henrico or Newport News. That's a bit of a distance.
And we're not talking about a hazardous materials event. And he can kind of attest to the chemicals in a structure fire that, but the county, neither the county nor the firefighters would be responsible for either salvage or cleanup. That's the project's responsibility, not anyone else's. So it's not something that would fall. In fact, they're explicitly trained not to engage the fire even after it's
gone, it's over and burned out, not to approach the fire because the experts basically show up at that time, and that's the project operator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Collins?
The only thing I had was, so I never got a clear answer. I've read all your documents. I've read all your responses. So when the solar project comes to the board, the one out in Shiloh, is this dependent upon that? In other words, if we say no to that, would you not do this?
It's completely independent.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Solons?
Hey, thanks for coming back. During the opening comments or the public comments, Mr. Bowen made a pretty cool suggestion about installing a sprinkler in there so that you don't have to worry about firemen. They have a much greater standoff distance and automate. What are your thoughts on that? And is there a technological reason why we shouldn't go that route?
That was my homework that I said I referenced. So I actually authentically looked, in all, because we've gone through several stages of national standards, and sprinklers are not something that, pretty much any group is calling for. And so I wanted to know what has been the debate, what is the technical or other reason. And the bottom line is it comes down to, and this is the same across the country, it comes down to they're not as effective as having a very responsive, higher volume of water available, even if that volume is just for a few minutes at a time, to put adjacent to, because we're talking about sprinklers on the adjacent units, not on the one that's burning. Number one. Number two is you have to have redundancy in everything we do. And in this case, redundancy is the firefighters would still have to come. They would still have to stand in the same spot. They would still have to have everything they need to respond. And so you're now making the sprinkler obsolete, because the whole point of the sprinkler would be, in theory, to automate and to save time and prevent XYZ from happening. But we have to have those folks there anyway, even if they just are standing around. So I think that's the reason why in 99.9% of the country, that's not the case. The one exception is in places where these types of facilities are within 100 feet of houses, which happens in cities. I mean, they're building these right up against houses. And in those cases, in certain situations, in some of these cities, they might have sprinklers because of that. But in a remote situation like this, you want to have the firefighters there anyway, probability wise. And when I mentioned probability earlier, that's actually looking at actual historic events, not modeling. Nothing would ever happen here anyway, but if it did, we would want trained folks there just in case, even if, yeah.
Mr. Stroud?
Sure, I'm sorry to do this to you, but in reading through the documents, I had another idea.
Yes, sir.
And so in sustainment, when you guys are replacing the batteries, because over time they need to get replaced, do you have verbiage in there already that ensures that when you replace the battery, that you're replacing it with the most current version or something, so that we know we're getting the safest, newest at the time replacement, and not 5-year-old technology that may be more hazardous? That's kind of where I'm.
There's nothing explicitly on that point. Are you aware of anything in the standards that address that? Yeah, I mean, frankly, it's very likely to be the same type of battery, but fast forward several years, it's in our interest to have the newest, because ultimately they degrade and we take them out to preserve the capacity of the project, not because necessarily if there's any kind of safety issue.
Right now in the solar industry, the batteries it looks like every 3 months, newer batteries are coming out, the newer technology. That's why I was.
Yeah, we don't have a condition that addresses that directly. I mean, and frankly, it very well might be, in 6 months, one battery comes out and this exact same battery goes in, that kind of thing. It's just regular maintenance over time.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Bender, you had one more?
Yeah, I did have one more, and this is based on those questions that Mr. McGill had given me, and it has given me thought. If you did have when I asked Chief Moody about the water tanker, and he said, was the instructions to allow a module to burn and to only apply water to the adjacent modules, we believe this would be sufficient size tank for this development. However, if we need additional water, we would have to shuttle in water with the use of tankers. If the adjacent Dahlgren West data center complex is developed, then a hydrant from this complex would be used for water source. If not, we would have to get the water from the area of advanced order parts or the credit union. So my concern here is knowing about the service authority and its issues, we would have to make sure a line was run out to you and that it was effective. So that is a concern of mine because we don't currently have that at this time. And you are coming before Dahlgren West.
Yeah, if you look at condition 4, it clarifies that there is an existing 12-inch water main on the property. And this condition doesn't finish the conversation with the county about where that water is coming from, under what condition, how much we would pay for water if it were ever needed. But this condition does specifically clarify that there is a line right there, and it goes right up to the water tower, the existing water tower.
But there's where you got it from.
And
that water tower is not functioning at this moment.
No, we're not connecting the water tower, but the infrastructure, and the county engineer clarified that in comments in the original application. The infrastructure is there. It's right there. So we need to come as a condition of site plan approval. We need to agree with the county on how to just
interconnect them.
Yeah.
But the issue is if it is not coming from Dahlgren, it is most likely coming from Claydale, which is on the courthouse system that does have challenges in the permit and the modification that's coming. And when we have talked to DEQ about that permit modification, they've made it very explicit that public consumption of water is before industrial use or any commercial development.
Right. And again, we're talking about an outside case, but according to this condition, the county can say, guys, you got to truck your water in. We don't want to sell you even in an emergency circumstance, even, on average, 5,000 gallons a year or 1,000 gallons a year. We just don't want it. This condition already contemplates that because it doesn't say you have to connect to refill from the county system. It does clarify that topic in terms of the 12-inch water main being on site, subject to agreement with the county in terms of refill.
I got a first time dealing with one of these. I've done a little research. So we're talking about the runoff and chemicals being in the water of the runoff, right? I mean, that's part of the discussion. But we're not spraying water on the fire itself. And do not the containers contain, they should be almost like airtight water, so nothing's running out of the container, right? So I'm trying to figure out where the toxic runoff is going to come from. If the container it's in is doing the job it's supposed to do, and it's keeping the chemicals inside the box, and we're not spraying water on that, we're spraying water on everything else.
Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out where the contamination part, because that's the biggest thing for me. I got to be I have to understand that because, Machotic was my playground growing up. It's still my playground today. It's now, it used to be the hidden gem, and now everyone's discovering it. Boat traffic out there is ridiculous. But so that's why I'm trying to understand. We're talking about the water runoff. We're talking about and I'm just trying to figure out where it's coming from.
It's not. This is a very belt and suspenders set of conditions. It's highly likely that the firefighters would never use that because there would not be direct runoff from a fire response, because unlike a structure fire, you're not putting water on the fire. You're putting water next to the fire, and they can capture that water if they want. We would still be obligated under another new condition to test that water, 7D. But your question is the answer, which is in very low probability case there's a fire. In that very low probability case, 99% of the time the water is placed on the adjacent unit, so there is no intermingling with the burning material. So there is no runoff concern, especially compared to other types of fires.
So
you do have to engage.
Walk me through the process of we're watering down the other units. What's the time frame of the fire goes out in 6 to 8 hours in most cases? That's what I've researched. I've been said, right? What is now the process of opening the container removing things? How long does that process take?
This would not be the firefighters, but I'm going to ask her to talk about.
Sorry, I did not mean to step on your foot. I apologize. I'm just getting over the flu. I've had it for the past week, so I'm actually doing much better now. I promise I'm not contagious. So as far as cleanup goes, those are third-party companies that are then contracted in by companies like Open Road Renewables. So what would happen is that after an incident is contained, managed, mitigated, and the fire department deems it to be done, a subject matter expert then that is site-specific, that is technology-specific, and is based with Open Road Renewables would then come in, and then they would then start making phone calls to third-party cleanup companies. Within that time frame, to give you an example, our sister company, ESA, with whom we work with, we have the capability of being called out in less than 24 hours to have a forward team put onto the ground, boots on the ground, and start doing a site assessment, site evaluation as to what was damaged, how much damage is done, and then we can start then allocating resources then to be brought on site to then pull everything off under Department of Transportation and PHMSA rules. So roughly within about a 24 to 48 hour time span, we can have boots on the ground, have a site assessment evaluation done, and work to then have that material then brought in, not on anybody else's dime, but theirs, to mitigate and manage and then pull everything off site per all of those standards. Then when cleanup occurs, with real world experience that I've had the opportunity to be a part of for the site system that they're putting in a permit for a single enclosure, we can have that done in less than 2 days. Now, without having everything in place in the permit, I'm giving you a.
Right, I understand. You're giving me the law about what it usually looks like.
Yeah.
I get it. Everything goes right. And so these containers themselves, they are airtight.
Yes.
So where is this plume of toxic gas that's going to be going up in the air that people keep talking about, and people are going to have to be sheltered down and shelter in place? I mean, where is that coming from? If we have an airtight container, nothing's escaping the container. I'm just trying to answer the question that people ask me and people at home.
So every technology brings different things to the table, but they still have to fall within the NFPA 55 standard. So you'll see different things like NFPA 68 and NFPA 69 that deal with passive or active ventilation. So certain systems will have passive ventilation, where they'll have vent ports all the way around the system, where you have clean air that gets introduced in that then pulls it out to keep the air cold. Maybe it's a liquid cooled system, and they have an active ventilation system. So it'd be like an HVAC that is in there that allows it to maintain its compliance throughout its duration of operation. So you're going to get different aspects of how air does get introduced into it, because you still have to introduce air to a degree. But they're not to the point where it's like you have mass water introduction into them, because they're meant to be watertight, they're meant to be airtight, where they want to keep as much of the environment out as possible while still keeping everything thermal regulated the way it's supposed to be. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Have any other questions?
I did want to mention the two items that are not here that are going to be, we agreed to put into the siting agreement, and that's pending, finalizing negotiation site agreement. One is there's an existing unfunded need for turnout gear in the county. This is PPE. And so in year one, we would fund 5 new turnout gears, and then every 5 years, we would fund 5 more turnout gears. If there's never a fire, it doesn't matter. It's just benefiting the county, benefiting the firefighters. And there's an existing need for a cleaning device. There's such a thing. It's like a washer dryer, basically, that cleans PPE, cleans turnout gear. And we provide that also up front for use by the county, irrespective of this project ever having the need for that kind of support. So those would end up in the siting agreement along with the other items that we've talked about.
Thank you so much. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if you all decide to act on this tonight, it should be contingent to an acceptable siting agreement that's acceptable to you all. Typically, you act on it, they can tell me if I'm wrong, but typically what you would do is advertise the siting agreement, and then you vote on this, the siting agreement right after, because we are not in a position to give you all a siting agreement that we can recommend yet. Mr. Smolnick and I, and we've been back and forth with them on that. So if you're going to act on it tonight, I would strongly suggest that you do it contingent upon an acceptable siting agreement to the board, or you could wait. We can try to get that siting agreement done, advertise it, and then you all could act on both.
We'd need to tie an action item to it to be directed towards you.
Siting agreement has to be advertised for public hearing, just like everything else. But typically what happens in these cases is you'll have both before you, and you can vote on the special exception. If you choose to act favorably on the special exception, then you would vote on the siting agreement that has been publicized and had a public hearing on.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if we were to get that contingent approval today, we would kind of know the costs that are in the conditions, and we could finalize negotiations on the siting agreement rather than having two moving pieces. So we would appreciate having this locked down, and even though it's contingent on that approval, and if you do that, if we could have it be incorporate the conditions that are in your packet, so that we have that locked down and we understand, what parts may still be moving.
It's up to you all, Mr. Chairman.
We'll take a stab at it. I make a motion that we approve a special exception to establish a battery energy storage facility, switchyard, and associated substation serving King George County, the Dogger Naval Support Facility, and surrounding regions on a portion of tax map 17, parcel 72, with Open Road Renewables LLC and Harwood Power LLC, contingent upon an agreed to site agreement between the county, King George County, and Harwood.
I would say a siting agreement that is acceptable to the Board of Supervisors.
I was so close. So moved.
And there was one other thing that I wanted to say, and I lost it because of the siting agreement.
Subject to the conditions in the packet.
And including the updated conditions submitted by Open Road Renewables, which are included in your packet.
So moved.
I have a clarifying question on that.
Yeah.
Is it Harwood or Open Road? Because they get interchanged a lot. So I just want to make sure that it's the right.
Oh,
The conditions in your packet are Harwood. That was one of the cleanup things. Yeah.
Do I have a motion?
Second.
Motion probably seconds. Any further discussion? Ms. Bender, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mr. Collins, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mr. Stroud, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mr. Sullins, how do you vote?
Yay.
Chair votes yay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion item? Yes. All right, discussion item 02-16, Committee for Agricultural Zoning District Text Amendment, Mr. Matthew J. Smolnick, County Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. If you recall, we had a discussion at the February 4th meeting where you instructed me to put together some thoughts on this committee to study the zoning ordinance text amendments. So what I provided you in the packet is just a summary of the information. And then I did my best, went back, looked through the meeting minutes and jotted a lot of things down to come up with an objective of the committee to examine current zoning and subdivision regulations with the goal to preserve the rural character of the county and the agricultural zoning districts. I told the board that I would bring back some suggested formats of the meeting, and those are kind of outlined, and these are all, for discussion. The meetings would be facilitated by myself and Ms. Kelly LeDuc, the Director of Community Development. The question came up on February 4th, will these meetings be open to the public? The answer is yes, they will be. I'm looking to hold them here in the boardroom of the Revercombe building. Looking to have, we talked about 6 or 8 different groups on February 4th. And really the sentence about to have the committee members represent, the interest groups on this topic. While non-committee members may attend meetings, it's strongly encouraged that only appointed committee members and county staff participate in the committee discussions and recommendations. I put this in there so if we want to have 8 or 10 people on this committee, 50 people show up to the meeting. We don't have 50 people in the meeting because that wasn't the goal of this board. It was to have a smaller committee. So while they are open, there are specific, recommendations for appointees representing what we believe is a wide array of interest. And if an individual has a concern or a point that they'd like to bring across, they would go through that representative who is appointed on the committee. Looking to hold them on a set date and time. I'd like to hold these on a weekly basis. As I told you before, I like to keep my foot on the gas on this particular one. So I'm recommending weekly meetings. I proposed, and I put something out here, this is for discussion. I just wanted to put some thoughts on the table. 3 p.m. on Wednesdays, commence within 2 weeks of the committee being appointed by the Board of Supervisors. And the committee will report back to the board and the Planning Commission, as this would require a public hearing. Any text amendments do. With a suggested list of alternatives in a form written in a position paper drafted by your staff. And thank you for the board members, and thank you for some of the citizens for reaching out to me directly. I've included a list of the names. I think if you scroll just a little bit further down, these are the names that I received. And there was one additional, and I sent this to the board on Thursday night. Mr. Howard Thomas approached me after the Planning Commission meeting. He lives 14354 Round Hill Road. He is what I would deem a small property owner. I believe he's on 2 acres. So I would like to, add him to this list, and I believe that was all sent to you. So for your consideration is the outline of this committee and the nominees that I received to date. Mr. Chair, I'll be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Mr. Chair, I do have one's a clarification question, as I did have this asked. The names on there are all residents of King George, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Paying citizens.
Yes.
Because there were some others that had asked to be on there, but they were not. And I know Mr. Solons had asked that. That was the response I gave. And then the second question, I had just asked the chair this, is, committees can last forever, but we need a set date that the committee would end.
Or set series of meetings where we may say we're 3 not to exceed 5, or just something in that range of, I don't know how many. I know you don't want to drag this out. I know I don't want to drag this out. Are all those names up there going to be on this committee, or are they just ones you brought?
Those are the nominees that I received from the board, and the one, Mr. Lynch, representing the base, I believe Townsend. I forget, is it Lieutenant Townsend? I apologize.
Captain,
I apologize. Captain Townsend.
In the name 6.
Sorry, sir. Recommended that Adam Lynch be on the committee.
He was supposed to be ex officio member of the committee. So, yeah.
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Sully.
I have a couple, actually. I see the staff wants to start at 3. That's going to be a non-starter for most of these people. I get you want to go home early, or within a reasonable time, but people aren't going to want to take off work to come do this. So I don't think we can get there from here. And I don't think we can go with all these names. That's just too daggone many. There's a dozen folks that will never get anything done.
I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing that last part. I heard the 3 p.m. is a non-starter time for you, Mr. Solons. What was the second part?
There's 12 people nominated. We need to call that down a little bit. We'll never get anything done.
Agree.
I think the objective was these are the 12 people that were nominated plus a couple additional ones, and they're going to narrow that down. Slight group. Mr. Stroud?
Yeah, we narrow it down. Do we set like a number per district outside of the county personnel? Because I've only got one on there right now for my district. So it may be heavier for some districts than others, but I have a district that's got a lot of acreage and large acreage parcels. So just a consideration.
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify, Lisa Beaver, she is with the Conservation Group, correct? And she is in Mr. Collins' district.
That's correct.
I didn't put her on there.
I did. Because we did mention that we wanted Land Trust and Conservation Group, and she does represent.
Any other comments, questions?
Just looking for direction from the board, how you, if you would like to call this list down, how you're going to do that.
Collins?
Chair, so, I mean, you know, that covers a lot of groups in King George. I think it's sufficient to keep it at that list and, you know, they're gonna have the more people on that, you know, of different backgrounds, the better your product will be. It might take, you know, might be a little rough getting to it, but they'll figure it out. And I think they should decide when they start their meetings. I mean, in a reasonable time. So, you know.
I would think it needs to be trimmed. I think it's just too many people in one room. I don't think you'll get anywhere. I mean, we've talked about cutting down other boards that carried 10 because there were too many. I don't know why we would think that like 14 people, counting the 2 that aren't on the list. I mean, I don't think you're going to get anywhere is what I'm trying to say. You're not going to get any kind of consensus on anything.
That's 12, right?
Plus there's an additional that people that aren't on the list is what he was saying too.
Who else is on the list?
Myself, Ms. LeDuc, and then Mr. Howard Thomas, the individual who approached me after the planning commission.
15.
That would total 15.
Those 2 don't really count. You know?
So that would be 13.
Don't count, but.
I mean,
Well, Mr. Chair, if you're going by category, there is a lot of realtors on there. So we could trim down by category if you wanted to trim.
Well, even if you did 2 per district.
We could trim down by household too, because there's a married couple on there.
Yeah,
that doesn't seem to be nice.
Well,
I'm just saying.
people up there that
You want diversity, give us some
same.
diversity.
So you gonna pick 2 per 2 per,
Well, if we try to do.
that'd be 10.
Yeah.
5 times 2 is 10 still, right? Okay. So that would,
You've got, that's 2 at large. So you got 2 per district.
right.
You got the 2, if you use the 2, if you use the 2 at large.
Well, wouldn't you think that would be fair? You wouldn't let the large not have any.
No, he can.
Talking for you, Sully, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm in agreement with you so far.
I think that
Why don't you just pare it down to 2 per district?
my personal opinion would be that everyone selects someone that you want to be on there, and then from those backgrounds, Mr. Smartick, you can choose the other ones that you'd like to be on there with your team. I would just be happy with that.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Everyone each of us can appoint at least appoint one person that we want, and then Mr. Smartick can take the backgrounds that aren't really touched in there, and he can just fill in the ones, and I trust him and Ms. LeDuc and staff to fill in the rest of it and come with a conclusion.
Well, if you look at the district,
That.
whoever that lady was that you said,
What was that?
Ms. Beaver,
She's in your district, but she's representing the Conservation Land Trust.
so that's in my district, and I didn't put her on there. Scott Cleveland, he's in my district, I didn't put him on there. So, and then I have the top 3 are in my, that's 5. So people put in people from my district that I didn't put in.
They just nominated themselves.
And I put in people from the Shiloh district that wanted to be involved. So
So why can't we just keep it at 2 per? I mean, if you want to.
what's the consensus of the board? I want to drag this out.
My only concern, especially with a couple of the names on there, is they were asked and put there for the reason, like maybe a farmer or the land conservation or realtor. We got to make sure that we cover the areas also.
You don't, if you don't want, if you want to put somebody on there that is not from your district to represent that, then I don't care. I don't care if they come from your district. It's just you have two people. So there's two people up there that you want to back, then I really don't care. But you have two people. Everybody can nominate two people.
I'm not for that then, because we were supposed to make a committee with the different categories represented, and I think by doing that, that then narrows.
If you
I'm just not.
If you took off two, you'd still have a good showing of all the categories. The question is, which two would that be?
Well, I will give one because Brian Gregan did say to me, because of tax time, he's an accountant, that he probably would not be able to serve if it was happening right away. Because, it's tax season.
So did you nominate him?
I did, so I can remove him. He's from the Shiloh district.
Okay. That's 11.
And just as a reminder to the board, we have Mr. Howard Thomas, who's not on this list, also small property. And
Which district is he from? Do you know?
He is from Shiloh District. He's a retired individual, 2-acre lot. Just a citizen who expressed an interest. So.
Mr. Chairman? So the idea was floated for 2 per, then the idea was floated to represent these groups. So I think that a good consensus would be 2 per would make it 10, and you can cover the groups. That's just my.
The current names that are on there, if we go 2 per, that's an easy decision. But the problem is we have a heavy representation of real estate, a very light representation of farmers and agricultural folks.
And Mr. Frank would be representing the agricultural, so.
I would rather, let's break it down by groups and let's come to an agreement on 1 or 2 reps for each one of those groups. That way there's somewhat equal representation for the various stakeholders and what they represent.
Well, if we're going to put a realtor on there, I'd recommend put Chris Deloach on there. And the other one I'd recommend is just a developer. He's from King George, grew up King George, would be Alan West. I think those two would be good. It's no offense to Miss Kelly Lewis, but Miss Kelly Lewis is just representing Gary Butler. I was going to say the quiet part out loud.
She was one of the first people to email me, so. I said I would forward all names over. They have a right to serve. I would leave Lisa on there representing that she is the only conservation person on there representing the conservation community. And Mr. Ed Frank is a farmer and a longtime family-owned property.
Those are your two.
Yeah, well, we're going by, if you want to go by category. If not, I would pick those two based on their.
If we had to go by 2, I would pick Julie Gibson and Sean Palavoda. Sean Palavoda covers a couple different categories.
So that drops.
Julie Gibson would be my 1, and number 2 would be Sean Palavoda. He covers real estate, owner of large property, owner of small property, owner of rental property, on and on and on. So he covers a lot of, and he's on the planning commission. So there's a lot of categories there.
Kelly Lewis, she dropped out. I don't know if we dropped Scott. Did we drop Scott Cleveland? Yeah, okay.
So who's left?
As a developer, I'd recommend Alan West.
Mr. Kramer, what's his background?
He's conservation, game and inland fisheries. He's also law enforcement. Now he's doing builders.
So that's a
his dad is his dad is construction, but he's
That hits more than one category.
multiple, but yeah. He's the only one that's from my district. For my only person I submitted. So, but
I can't hear, sir. You're not talking in the mic.
what are we, you're right. What are we down to?
So on the committee, I have Julie Gibson, Sean Palavoda, Alan West, Lisa Beaver, Chris DeLoach, Ed Frank, and Glenn Kramer.
So is that that's acceptable?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I'm okay with that. If we need another large property owner, then I can submit one, but right now,
That's where we start.
And maybe have it open, make sure we post it so that those that did offer can come and give comment during public comment.
So what I can do is the individuals that I just read, Gibson, Palavoda, West, Beaver, DeLoach, Frank, and Kramer, I will contact each of them. And then I think the suggestion by Mr. Solon, see if we can start later. We're okay with that. And then we can, I would like to meet on a weekly basis to keep this going. 6 meetings max, 6 week, meet every week for 6 meetings to report back to the Planning Commission.
So, Mr. Smolnik, if you have you and Ms. Kelly on there, could we not just have her on there and not you? What I'm trying to achieve is that Mr. Smolnik knows what I'm trying to achieve.
I do.
He's got so many irons in the fire. He's got a lot of irons in the fire. And she's a specialist in this stuff. So, not that he isn't.
I'm willing to work with this board and the citizens to, whatever you would like, for me to do, I'll work on it. But, thank you, Mr. Collins. I do have a lot of night meetings. That's why initially I proposed the 3 p.m. to try to cut down some of the night meetings.
The short window, as long as at the end of the day, it's getting reported back to you, what's going on, how things are moving. So we're just kind of kept in the loop with that. Sound good? Ms. Kelly LaDuke, do you think you can handle that? Saying it's not a specialist.
Well, she was in charge of community development.
But Mr. Collins, you got to herd some cats here too. You got to differing opinions,
Ms. LaDuke is very professional. She and I bring different strengths to the table. Mine is more of a, the economic development, finding all the different ideas and making them work and herding the cats. If the board would like me and Mr. Collins, I appreciate it. But if it's in the best interest of this county, and brings the best material back to the Planning Commission and board, I'll do whatever it takes.
I think that I know it's a lot of irons, but I think it hopefully gets wrapped up quicker in 6 weeks. But I think that they're going to need your leadership in the room. Just my thoughts.
I agree.
That's consensus? Yes.
What was the consensus? What was the consensus?
Chose names. Mr. Smart's going to be part of the group as well.
Yeah, I concur. I would like to say that if for any reason in that process, so we don't have to come back and do this, if one of those names drops out or for whatever reason that I'd like to nominate Mr. William Taylor as a large property owner from my district to be a candidate. So it's an alternate.
An alternate?
Yes. William Taylor.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. All right, it's your report time, Mr. Smolik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first thing, a couple quick items here. First of all, a couple appointments. We are looking to nominate Mr. Theodore Klopsis and Ms. Gina Pansiera to the Local Board of Building and Fire Code Appeals for a 2-year term expiring on March 1st, 2027.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, I have 3 items. I'm going to do the second one, I think a little bit easier here. So we looked back, there was a question came up during CIP about the old courthouse. So it wasn't last year, it was actually the year before. It was on the July 11th, 2023 board item 07-11. There was $550,000 for the repurpose of the old courthouse. And whenever you go to the engineering request that was submitted, the last sentence, I think the purpose of this request is to provide funding for the preparation of construction and bid documents to renovate the old courthouse. That was approved on July 11th of 23. So that's the answer to your question. It's already in the CIP. Lastly, I was contacted by Dr. Jesse Boyd. The school board requested a joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors. I got this request today. I said, I've got a meeting tonight. I will bring it to my board to see what their will is. So where we're at, I want to give you an update. We had a meeting today, my finance team, Norm and myself, to go over revenues for the county. We've got, I think, most of what we have to put together, the framework for revenue. I already have the expenditures. The school board, as you've seen in some of my weekly reports, or if you've been following the school board meetings, the school board's already been briefed and the budget presentation made by Dr. Boyd. I'm not 100% certain, but this was part of my budget calendar that I presented to you all last fall. Was a joint meeting with the school board, as they are the largest costs to the county. So thoughts on a joint meeting here in the next month with the school board, and if so, would you like it during your regular meeting time?
Mr. Chair, I'm okay with having a joint meeting, but I prefer not to be in our regular meeting time.
Suggestion an hour before?
I agree that it should be a separate day.
Yeah.
The last time we did it, I think we did it on a Monday before our Tuesday evening meeting.
I'm okay with Monday.
I'm okay with it as long as it doesn't conflict with GWRC.
Okay. So I will shoot for a Monday that does not conflict with GWRC, work with Dr. Boyd. We'll reserve the room here.
Sounds good.
Thank you, everybody.
Can we get just a couple Mondays? So we make sure.
A couple Mondays, yes. I'll give you some options. Mr. Chair, that is the end of my county administrator's report.
All right, secondary public comment. Time is set to 3 minutes per person to give everyone a chance to speak. If you do wish to speak, please provide your full name and district in which you vote so we can have it properly on the public records. Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to speak? Mr. Shaw, you want to speak again? Got a hat? No hat? All right. Is there anybody online? Anybody receive a correspondence? And I will close the secondary public comment. Do I have a motion?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn the board until Tuesday, March the 4th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. in the boardroom, River Calm Building.
Favor say aye.
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 We are closed. Thank you.